All right, so I'm going to call the order City Council of Town of Hollywood Park, Tuesday, July 18th, 2023 at 6 p.m. Invocation, Councilmember Kuntz.
Father, we pray for wisdom and guidance. And just pray that you will lead us today and guide our conversations and reveal to us your will. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, Patrick.
Councilmember Drash.
Present.
Councilmember Kuntz.
Here.
Councilmember Randall.
Present.
Councilmember Gonzalez.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Pierce.
Present.
Mayor Moore.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, let's go to reports. Fire Department, Chad.
Okay, we had a total of 62 calls for the month, with an average time of 5 minutes and 49 seconds. Probably what made that go up a little bit is we had a call over here behind Chester's, and dispatch had it as Churches, not Chester's. And so we were driving around forever looking for it. It was right here in the parking lot.
Okay.
So that threw our times off a little bit.
Okay.
So we had 29 EMS calls, 2 lift assists, 24 fire, smoke, and CO alarm, 1 structure fire, 2 assisted public police, 2 motor vehicle accidents, 1 grass brush fire, and then we had 1 animal rescue. And that's the whole 62 calls.
Any questions for fire?
Have you used the new ladder truck yet?
Yes, we have, ma'am. Yes. We haven't used it as far as actually fighting a fire with it, but we've used it for several. Well, we trained on it so I don't know how many of y'all know there's a over off of Afton Oaks. There's an old like a rehabilitation center over there. It's like a 3-story, but it's empty. So we go over there and raise the ladder and hook up the water and spray water to get everybody used to using it. Because we don't really have, other than Killiman, we don't have, well, in the hotel. But it's easier because there's no traffic. And we've also used it to go to the county out in Bearable Verde,
Okay.
north of here. So,
So you've used a mutual aid?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
But you haven't had to engage a structure fire with it yet?
The actual structure fire was on the 4th of July, but
Okay.
it wasn't fireworks related. It was a garage fire.
Oh, okay.
So we were the last one in, so we basically did RIT, and they pretty much already had it contained by the time we got there, so.
Gotcha.
Which is usually the case.
Sure.
But yeah.
All right, any other questions for?
I've also noticed at least once in the last couple of months, the fire truck driving around the streets. Is that part of just kind of getting used to the truck, or that's been fun
Well,
for the children?
It also has to do with the trees. So we're trying to see where the trees need to be trimmed, so it doesn't break windshields and lights and stuff like that.
All right, police, Chad? Thank you, Chad. Chad and Chad.
Yeah. How often does that happen? Never.
Never.
There we go. Awesome. All right. Good evening, council. Hopefully you all had a safe and fun July 4th. I know we did, participating in the parade, so that was always a lot of fun. Leading that parade, it's funny, Patrick was with me this year, but I had this map like taped to the console in the car because I don't want to make a wrong turn. Can you imagine leading a parade and going down the wrong street, right? So I'm just so nervous So I'm trying to throw candy, smile, and wave, and I'm going, oh, crud, did I make the right turn? Where am I going, Patrick? You know, so luckily everybody's lined up on the street, and they did a good job. So we didn't get lost, so I'll call that a success. We ended at Voigt Park. It was great. So thank you for putting that on HPCA. We really enjoyed being a part of that. It was a lot of fun. Calls for service, we were, of course, during the summertime, busy time. I know our court was extremely busy this past month. I know Patrick talk about that. But we're already at almost 4,000 citations for the year, so we're cooking. Kind of a busy month for car break-ins. Not anything major, but we're certainly seeing a lot of attempted stuff. You'll see in your report, counsel, we have a few license plates that got stolen. That's a pretty common thing in San Antonio. They like to steal a license plate and put it on a car that they've stolen. Try to make it match as much as possible, because it takes a while for you to notice your plate missing versus your car missing. You kind of tend to notice that pretty quick. So, yeah, if you ever come out and you don't have a front license plate and you had one the night before, you need to let us know. That's a thing right now. On our narrative, there's just a few things I want to point out. So when you look down here where it says the person moving into the area failed to register with the police department as a sex offender. So anytime a sex offender moves into Hollywood Park, depending on their reporting requirement by DPS, they're required to check in with us, and we have a process we have to go through for those individuals. We have a specially trained detective that handles just that. So this individual failed to do that per his requirement. Now, I'm going to say this, I'm not putting names in this report, but this individual's been arrested before for the same thing, before coming to Hollywood Park. His parents live in Hollywood Park. He came here to live with his parents. That's why he had to register. This past weekend, we got called out Saturday because he was spotted and we had a warrant for his arrest. So a little bit of a standoff. That's what the notice was about this weekend on El Portal. Had a little bit of a standoff with this individual, but it ended peacefully, and we were able to take him into custody. Nobody got hurt. But it was a little bit hairy there for a while. It reminded me when the fire department had assisted the police, they always come out in situations like that with us, and just the professionalism and the way they take care of people is amazing. So thank you for your help, guys. That was a hard call. We did have one vehicle stolen. We recovered it about an hour later, just down the street, so it didn't get very far. It had OnStar, so OnStar killed it while it was parked, which is awesome. I love that. I wish there was a camera in there so we could see their face when that happens. That would be amazing. I'd pay for that, and I'd show it to you as well. So we did taser training this past week. We do this every 2 years. We recertify, but this is a new taser that we just got, so it's a little bit different than the older versions. Now, it looks pretty scary when you look at these pictures, these little darts. We did have one of our officers volunteer to be tased for the training. So if you'd like to see that, I brought that today. Yeah, I knew y'all would. So by the way, Taser 7, so what we have now. Now, listen, this has 2 shots, where the old ones, it was 1 shot and you had to reload it and it took time. But this has actually 2 shots available. So if one doesn't work, you have a backup. You can also use it as a stun gun, which is really nice, without having to pull the cartridge out. So officers had to learn how to do all that over these drills that we do. We have an instructor in-house. So as you can see that picture there, this is one of the cartridges, and what happens is that little barrel, the whole thing comes out. That whole barrel comes out, and there's wire inside, and it unwinds as it travels, right? And this connects to the taser. So those barbs stick clothing or preferably skin and make connection. Once you have 2 connections, that's when the taser will send the shock. It works very well. Very, very happy with the way this turned out. So I knew y'all want to see this video.
How far does that shoot?
That one will go 22 feet, so pretty good distance. Now, I got permission from the officer to show this. Officer Wilburn. Yeah, that's not it. That's the other video. Sorry, that's the chase video. There it is. Okay.
Gets your attention.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's see if we can get it to work here. Okay, this is part of the training where you stand off and then you see her shoot. See the two lasers? That's where the darts are going to hit. So you want one dart above, one dart below the belt line. So that's what that demonstrates. It's the conductive target, by the way, so it'll simulate a good connection or not. Obviously, the yellow, you don't want to shoot in the yellow for obvious reasons, I hope. This one might be it. Yeah, this one's it. I don't know if we can get sound or not, but we'll try. Notice, totally incapacitated.
Yeah, that's why I said no.
And she volunteered for that?
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
asked me if I wanted to volunteer.
We
for
need
that.
we need one person
She needs
to
a
do
bonus
it,
this month, maybe.
and she stepped up. This is pulling the darts out.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I think she needs a special award.
Watch the
Chief Pritchard said he's going to do it next year.
damn right.
He's going to volunteer.
Volunteered.
None of the guys did.
None of the guys, way to go, ladies.
Now, if you didn't note, so in this video, not that one, sorry. There it is. Those are firemen. See the two firemen? They're so sweet.
It's awfully nice of them to stand there and hold her.
Hold her so she can't leave.
Well, we thought maybe they would get shocked too by holding on to her, so we were hoping it would, but it doesn't work that
Doesn't
way.
work.
No. So Officer Plate, in this video, he's a certified instructor for TASER, so we got that done. Everybody got recertified. By the way, Officer Wilburn does not recommend it. She wanted me to share that with you. One of the reasons we do this, though, is because we can ask, okay, what does it do to you? How does it incapacitate you? How does it feel? So that we can be sensitive to the way we use it. It is a lot of voltage, but it's 5 seconds and you recover almost immediately. So that's the nice thing about it. It's a very effective tool. Usually, you can get compliance just by showing the TASER or showing the ARC, when we can get some compliance. It's kind of rare that we actually have to use it, so it's really good. I'll finish this up real quick. So during prime time, prime day, and all these other sales that are going on, just be aware we always see an uptick in package thefts. So if you need some pointers on that, there's a lot of ways now that we can help you from having these things sitting on your porch, and you can still get them. So we put this on social media, so there's some good information there. And then this is a picture we have a little drone, and this is a drone picture from July 4th. We just took a few photos from the air. And then I put this on here, so if there's anyone that needs a cooling center or needs a place to go to get out of the heat, San Antonio does a really good program. That's the website you can send people to, and they can find a place to get out of the heat if need be. Pending that, Mayor, that's all I've got. And I did bring the TASER if anybody wants to demonstrate it.
Funny guy.
What? That concludes my
All right, are there any questions for Chief?
Yeah, Chief, can I bring you back to the sex offender?
Sure, absolutely.
Right, so they're required, I guess, to notify where they're always at. I mean, so he didn't do that, so it was a violation, but I
Correct.
assume he's back at his parents'
not.
or
He's
or-
not.
He's not?
No.
Okay, can we keep him from being in the neighborhood, or is that?
That's a great question. So here's the thing on this now. Not all sex offenders have the same requirement. It's important to know that. Some we have to see them once a year. Some have lifetime commitments where no matter from here on out they have to register with us. Some have monthly registration requirements. It depends on the level of danger or the level in which they were arrested. Okay, this individual was required to report every 90 days, and it's a lifetime commitment. So it's not good. Because he's a habitual, non-registered offender, I don't think we're going to see him anytime soon. And if we do, the law requires him to report in. And if he doesn't, every time he doesn't, we just go pick it back up. So the reason we had the standoff because he did not want to go back to jail. That's the main deal. He was not willing to go. He was trying to do other things. So if he does get out and comes back into the neighborhood, you know, we have ways to. None of this, by the way, this is all. DPS has a website. You can go on right now and put your zip code in, and it'll show you every sex offender in your neighborhood. Once a year, we scrub that list just to make sure we've got everybody on our list. So it's open record stuff. So at any time, you can check to see if there's a sex offender in your neighborhood. In fact, I'll send out the link on social media this week, so you guys can see it. So we're lucky here. We normally don't have any. So we usually carry 1 or 2 at a time, but that's about it. So it's good.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions for Chief Pritchard?
You mentioned court. The citations that we give out,
Yeah.
the cost that we charge, what percentage does Hollywood Park get from
That's
each
a
of
great
those?
question. Yeah, that's a really good question. So, and I know Ryan probably has a pretty good answer for this too. So, I tell you what, I know a lot of the answers, but because we're on the enforcement part of this, I want to let them talk about the collection part of it, if that's okay.
That's fine. Patrick, you want to do it or you want me to do it?
I think I can, please chime in. We've covered some of this before, I think. It depends on the type of violation, and there's a million variables, and I wish I was exaggerating. And half of it pretty much comes here, and then a large chunk of it goes to the state, and then collection agencies and things like that.
So the citations, when defendants come in and they're going to pay them, they don't really care what the breakdown is. They just want to know how much money they have to pay. But technically, the court has, and Fred and Patrick have to keep track of kind of an itemized list, because there's what's called the fine, there's what's called the court costs, and then there are kind of some extra costs that add on depending on what's happening with their citation. The court costs are set by law, and they always go to the state. That entire amount goes to the state. The fine amount, most of the fine amount actually stays in Hollywood Park. There are some curves, I guess, depending on the percentages, because the state law does say you can keep all the fines up to a certain amount, and then you have to remit certain, more of it to the state. And so it's not a simple answer, one-shot kind of explanation. I'm oversimplifying it pretty dramatically, but in general, that's the way it works. Did I miss anything, guys?
I think if you said roughly 30 to 40%, depending on the violation, is about the dollar amount that comes in. But the other thing to consider, there are certain legislative requirements with some of those dollars, even in Hollywood Park, that they have to go to. Like court security is one of them. The fines that we collect help pay for the bailiff, help pay for the judge, help pay for the prosecutor. That all gets funneled into that security fund. And there's other state programs that, like $1 goes to another program on the state. Every dollar for every citation written in Texas goes to a victim's assistance fund, right? So those things happen. So there's literally, depending on also if it's a no insurance fine versus a stop sign versus a speeding versus sometimes they do what they call a compliance dismissal, where if it's your registration is expired, well, the ticket on that could be $140, but if you go get it fixed and bring us the receipt, it's a $25 dismissal fee, and then that basically stays with Hollywood Park. So there's just it goes up and down. But last year, and we'll do this when we do our annual report to council, the PD report, I always include citation revenue that we kept. And I get that from Fred. And it's generally about $180,000 a year. It really depends on the enforcement, but between $100,000 to $180,000 a year. Okay.
Any other questions for Shad?
I've got a question for Ryan, and it's a little bit further ahead in the package, but in reference to citations in court and all that stuff, our citations are up significantly over the same time period last year.
They're writing more citations.
Right,
Yeah.
no,
There's
and
more
I totally understand, and that's it. Does this create a problem in our courts being able to handle adjudicating all these? I mean, do we get to a point like that with our current staff?
The council always has to kind of balance your, your manpower aspects with kind of what's happening around you. And when, they're patrolling, it just depends on if more people are violating the law at that time.
Well, I'm not talking about from a police perspective and an enforcement. I'm talking about
Right.
from an adjudication standpoint of adjudicating all of these citations. Do we run into problems with our 1 day a month court being able to handle and adjudicate those citations? Does that run into an issue for us?
What I've seen for that is this last court was very busy. Court date was very busy. And there was a lot of factors for that, a lot of resets. There was the STEP program that the officers were working. A particular officer that is known for pulling people over left us not too long ago, and some of those cases came up, and I'm pretty sure they're done. We also had an extra week within that writing period, or the police had an extra week between courts. The court date was delayed by a week because of the July 4th to July 5th. So there was an extra week built in, so suddenly there were more people here. And so there was a few anomalies related to that specific court date this month. And as far as like being able to handle that number of people, we've talked about going to, the latest idea we talked about is just going to 2 court times, but keeping 1 date.
Okay.
Maybe just having 1 docket in the morning and 1 at night. What we've done in the interim is really try to pull apart the docket or the list of defendants and pull apart that docket and say, these folks are going to be compliance dismissals. Let's not have them wait in the courtroom all afternoon. Let's try to get them out the door. And we've been able to do that successfully. If the numbers like July hold up, then we would have to definitely go to 2. We're pretty busy. But at least in here for the size of room that it is. But otherwise, and the lobby as well. Wish we could expand that, but that's what it is. So outside of that, the manpower is holding. We've talked about just maybe expanding it to possibly if the numbers stay consistent. Now, what that means, because July we add that extra week in, means the next court date is shorter by a week. So we'll
Right.
have fewer people next time around. So we'll have to see for a couple months, see how that goes.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
If citizen comment there is a citizen participation time if you will hold your comment still in. Any other questions for Chief? Okay. Moving on to Public Works, Kelly.
Mayor, Council, how are you doing today?
Good?
Right.
Everybody enjoying the heat?
Yeah.
Can you take it up a little bit more if you want? I mean, I got all this still to go through, so. Is that better?
Yeah.
All right.
Much.
Our Public Works report, we'll start off with code enforcement. You can see Angela's been busy this month of June. She had 99 cases that she filed. 93 of those she's closed. The other 6 are just waiting for compliance. It's nothing major. Most of them are checking permits and verifying that contractors are getting the proper permits and following up with that kind of stuff. Some of them are resident initiated, so Angela's doing a super good job on that. Super busy. If you look at the Voight Center, you see our numbers are up for the month of June. Crazy busy month. We did 32 events in 30 days. So team was super busy. Guys really put on a lot of time to keep the place going and keep it looking good. So I give my guys lots of credit for that. Super good team that y'all got working for y'all. Some of the things that Public Works worked with this week, we had a number of blowdowns in the drainage areas from the storms in May. We worked on cleaning up Sagecrest, Rio de Mata, El Cerrito. There was one over off Fleetwood. So that took some time, getting the trees trimmed and cleaned up and the brush moved out of there. We do that for a couple of reasons. Number one is for the fire department. It's a huge fire hazard to have dead brush laying around, especially in this kind of heat. It also helps, keeping it clean keeps the flooding down. There's also a TCEQ requirement to keep the drainage areas where they flow well. So something that we have to pay attention to and stay on top of. And we have a number of residents that really help by keeping me informed when stuff starts to hit the ground that we don't know about. We had some lighting issues down at the park, here at City Hall, just normal stuff, lights, fixtures go out, we have to get them replaced. And Jesse's really, really good at doing the lighting, and he's training up the other guys so everybody will have that skill set. We had a fence that we damaged when we was doing some work that's been taken care of. I don't know if y'all noticed, a lot of the street signs have been replaced. We put some new street signs out. The ARPA fund helped fund that, so street signs that were missing, we put them out. I've got some spares in my office, so when we do lose some, then we can immediately get them back up and going again. Let's see, we had to do some tree trimming for the new fire truck. Fire department is, y'all mentioned they're driving around, so they drive around, they report back to us the trees that are in danger of hitting their truck. So we'll go address it with the residents, or if it's on city responsibility, then we go get it taken care of. Drainage maintenance, with the rains and everything that we had in May, grass is growing like crazy, mosquitoes are bad, and then we go to 100-degree weather, so it's pretty rough on the guys. They really put in a lot of time and work really hard to keep this place in good shape. We had some pool equipment that we had to do some repair on, some equipment, shop equipment that we had to work on, minor plumbing. We had a plumbing issue in the pump room that that affected the splash pad. We had to repair that. And then, of course, we had the 4th of July party and parade. And I want to thank the firemen. They brought the ladder truck down and hung the banner for the 4th of July parade. Watching the guys work with that and then getting some practice in on finite manipulation of the ladder is paramount to their skills. One other thing I want to address, and this has come up and it's been a hot topic lately, is the heat and the temperature of the pool. So I want council to understand and rest assured that I have and am working on trying to come up with a solution. I've reached out to professionals, Keysars Pools, Aquatica, Pool Share, Blue Haven Pools, some of the companies that I interact with, to get their input as professionals, what they recommend. Some of the feedback that I'm getting is the intense heat is caused by the excessive heat over the summer. We have what's considered a shallow pool, a shallow depth pool, because it's 6 foot or less. And then it being completely blue on the bottom, that dark blue helps attract the heat. We've looked into aerators. I have not found a aeration system that will work on a public municipal pool and be able to stand up to the demands that that's going to require. We're still looking at some options. I've got feelers out, and hopefully we'll come up with a solution. The biggest solution, the biggest suggestion I've got from everybody is let's get some shade over it. The more shade you got, the better it's going to be. It's going to stay cool longer and take longer to heat up. Mr. Bruce reached out to me over the 4th of July and had a suggestion. I thought it was a good idea. I've already bought the parts for them, waiting to come in. As soon as they come in, we're going to give them a shot and see if that will work on an aeration system. Just waiting for the parts to get in. That's pretty much what I've got. I'll entertain any questions that y'all have.
Any questions for Kelly?
How are you and your guys doing with the heat? Is there anything that you need support-wise from the city that would help with that?
I bought a new ice chest for them. I'm packing water out. I bought cooling rags that they wear around their neck. They keep in the ice. I bought like 2 dozen of them. They just keep them in there. They're instructed 15 minutes and they take a break. I've tried to pull them out of the heat after lunch and get them doing something inside, setting up the Voight Center, working inside where it's cooler. Anything I can to try to eliminate their exposure to the heat. You know, they're all acclimated to it, but I don't care how acclimated you are, it's brutal out there. And the communication of, hey, guys, you know, if you're not feeling good, if you start feeling bad, let us know. We did have an incident, the fire department took care of it, where one of the guys got a little bit lightheaded and woozy because of the heat. He's back up and running, no ill effects.
Did you, I know you and I had a brief conversation. Did you actually get any firm numbers on a shade structure?
I have not got a price yet. They came out today to remeasure, so I'm just waiting for Mr. Wheeler to get me the information on the pricing.
Okay. Any other questions for Kelly? All right, moving on. Thank you, Kelly. Finance, Fred.
Thank you, Mayor. Consent agenda, I've provided you with the balance sheet and revenue and expense report of the general fund. Total revenues in the general fund for May 31st was $4,631,000. For the month, revenues totaled $315,000, and revenues were up over the previous month because we received some franchise fees from CPS of $49,000. And our swimming pool revenues for May were $51,400. Total expenditures in the general fund for the 8 months were $3,607,000. So we have excess revenues for the 8 months ended of $1,023,000. Total expenditures for the month were $461,000. So we had a deficit for the month of $145,000, our excess expenditures. Also in the consent agenda is the summary, balance sheet and summary of the revenues and expenditures of the EDC and special revenue funds. Interest income earned for the month of May was $34,262. Our combined balance of our cash accounts as of May 31st was $7.9 million, and that consists of planes of $301,000, Texas class of $7,090,000, and Tex Pool of $572,000. And I just wanted to point out, you were asking about municipal court revenues. As of May 31st, our municipal court revenues are $177,000, and we budgeted $205. We'll probably exceed budget. Do you have any questions?
I also just noted that Fred and I, and actually all departments are working through their preliminary budgets for the budget workshops next month. So we do that on a weekly basis, pretty much every other day. So right now, so he's also engaged in that. Any other questions for Fred? Okay. Thank you, Fred.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Admin report, Patrick.
Thank you. For the month of June, we had 12 open record requests. For our pool passes, we've had for the year to date 287 different pool passes and punch cards sold, and those are still primarily family passes. And I would also note that the attendance at the pool, by the way, is good. Some of the percentage last year, and this so far, I mean, at the end of the pool year, I'll be able to give you a much more solid number, but the last year's attendance at the pool was about 70% resident, 30% non-resident. It's pretty much on the exact same track this year too. I think it's almost 70-30 again. So that's good. Monthly attendance at the pool for June was almost 3,500 people, and about 5,000 people just through June have gone to the pool. So that's good. I would say, as you can tell, the sales are down a little bit by the number of passes from one year to the next. However, they're not down significantly in terms that the revenues are actually greater at this point in time than they were last year. So the change in price from last year to this year has aided that. And like I said, we'll have a better idea of that at the end of the pool year, but for the budget last year, obviously we knew the pool was making approximately $92,000, I think, and we were well short of the $140,000 or so that we needed for the pool. In the budget, we knew we were going to request some type of rate increase or different pricing structure for the pool. So for the budget, it was just plugged in at 100,000. We've exceeded just a little over 100,000 so far for the pool this year. So we've met budget for the pool. As far as the rest of the projections, it's looking good. We're not going to get to 140,000. I imagine pool sales drop after the 4th of July. So, but we are still selling pool passes every day. So that's good.
Patrick, if I may ask a question on that, I noticed that the total number of pool passes are down significantly from last year. In fact, they're down about 40%. Do we have, and most of that is resident passes as opposed to non-resident passes. Do we have any feel? Is it the pricing structure? Is it a change in attitudes? Do we have any feel why it's down so far? From the number of passes.
You know, I anecdotally, all I have is anecdote. Some people will say, wow, that price has changed, you know, when they buy their passes, but that's primarily residents. The non-residents have no problem. They don't hesitate on their purchase. And the non-resident price is double the resident price.
Right.
And it can only be double. It can't be more than that.
Right.
So I want to make sure everyone understands that. And so right now, yeah, it could be because of that. I would assume that even though revenues are up, people might get more used to that price structure and be willing to, even more willing to purchase those next year.
Okay.
That's my guess.
What did you say? I missed the part where you said 70% versus 30%. Is that 70% residents and 30% non-residents that are attending, or was that?
Just for attendance.
That's attendance, not budget, or that's
Right.
not revenue. Okay.
Right. Oh, and by the way, so, and we track it different ways, right? So the pool makes money in 5 different ways. The main way is wristbands and punch cards. And then it also has pool parties, which I haven't accounted for yet. But wristbands, punch cards, pool parties, hammerheads, quad A, and gate fees. Okay. And just the daily gate fees when people need to go in there. And that is up significantly. We're about where we were last year, so that's good. Gate fees are up quite a bit. The revenue from gate fees is up quite a bit.
Can we get the numbers on that? Because maybe what we're seeing is a switch of people buying family passes.
Yeah.
And they're just paying a fee when they go down and go swimming. Because last year at this time, we had done 750 family passes.
Right.
That's both resident, non-resident.
Right.
And then this year, we've only done 500, and that's a significant drop. But that may be the answer. People are switching over to just paying when they go.
Sure.
It could be, and it's what's neat. I've seen this quite a bit. When people come in, they might ask, "Well, what are my options for this?" And we'll walk them through it. You know, in terms of, well, it's just you know, it's just my wife and I. Oh, they might not want the family pass, so we'll give them some options. Some people will say, "Well, we'll just get 2 individual passes, save us $40 there," or some version. There's different ways to kind of combine that for whatever they want to do. I mean, some people just say, well, we're only going to go swimming a handful of times. Well, maybe you just want punch cards. Just different variations of that.
On that note, I do
Thank
want to, excuse me. On that note, I do want to let you know I received a complaint on Friday. Someone came to purchase, she wasn't sure what it was called, but she wanted to buy some bands. And she was told, you can't buy bands here, you have to buy them at the pool. And she was said, well, can't, like, you know, basically, but I'm a resident, can't I get something here? And she goes, I'm sorry, we don't sell bands. Well, she didn't know to say punch cards, so she ended
Buy
up,
bands here, though. We wouldn't.
she was told she cannot get bands. No, I'm sorry, day pass bands. Not the white bands. No, not like $120 ones. More of like, hey, I'm having some guests. I want to buy some passes. And she was not given the option for punch cards. She was only given the option of, she basically said wristbands. She didn't know what she was asking. She had just heard that you can get them
Just the
discounted
gate
here.
fee, essentially?
She was told, go to the gate fee. Go to the gate, you can get them there. And she was never offered the option of the punch card, so she had to leave and pay the extra fee. So just giving that
I'll
feedback
look
to
into
you.
it. Thanks. That's good info. Councilmember Randall, I want to clarify your question, I guess, on the, if I can go back to that. And I want to make sure I understand. So you're asking about, you want to make sure that, well, please state it again. Was the residential part of, maybe people are seeing what the options are, maybe they're just going down to the pool versus buying a pass? Could be. That might be best at the end of the year when we can kind of break the numbers down a little bit more.
Yeah, it would be interesting. And we can't take any action this late in the season, but I'm just curious because that's a significant drop.
Yeah.
If there's any way, if we can tell, okay, people are not buying the family pass anymore and they're switching over and buying day passes, if we could see, if we have that information, I think it would be something that we need to know, especially going into next year.
I can easily look up gate fees year to year.
Okay.
We track those when we get.
Yeah, all we have is the passes here.
Sure. Gate fees. Last year in gate fees, I believe it was about $6,500 in gate fees, and we're about 6,200 right now for the year, give or take. I mean, we're looking good on gate fees.
That may be the answer. How much did the gate fee go up?
It's $10 resident, $20 non-resident.
10, what was it last year?
5, 5 and 10.
So that's a 100% increase. You'd have to have an awfully large swing to make up for this difference in passes.
We'll look at the number of gate fees, I suppose. We could look at it that way.
Yeah, I don't know what information you
Actually,
have.
we track it by just the pool log. And I don't look at it, but when Jeanette plugs that in, and so when she just looks at whether they're resident or non-resident, but they're not, then you'd have to go back and look at whether.
Right.
We just look at, if we made $100 at the pool one day, we're not breaking that down by 10s or 20s.
Right.
So, I don't know.
Okay.
Well, but it's worth looking at the end of the year. We'll figure it out.
Thank you.
Sure.
Are you done with your report?
The only other thing I'd add on permits is you will definitely see an increase on tree permits now that it's July. So that's it. The 4th of July parade was a lot of fun. That was good. And we have an EDC meeting on Thursday. That'll be fun too.
All right.
Thanks.
Patrick, I got a quick question. On the municipal court, I just want to make sure I understand. Defendants appeared 105 and then defendants 246. So we had 246 defendants, but only 105 showed up. Is that what that means?
That is correct.
Okay, and then those that don't show up, then that triggers the warrants for their arrest, or?
It could, yes.
Okay.
Generally, they'll go to collections or
they would
some. I think for warrants, it's 60 days out, and so if they don't show up or then come in, we have people come in the next day, for example, and they'll say, "I'm here for my court date," and we say that you missed it. It was yesterday, and then they want to speak to the judge and et cetera, et cetera. But one of the options is, because they can't then see a judge or prosecutor, they can just pay it right then and they take care of it.
Okay. Is there a percentage that just kind of disappears that, we never do anything, or?
That's what the collections agency and the warrant officer
And the warrant,
does.
that's why we engaged a warrant officer this year.
Right.
Because we
And
had
the
such
warrant
a
officer-
backlog especially from COVID, so.
Okay.
Yeah, warrant officer, I think just in June, and just so y'all are clear, that the warrant officer gets paid on top of the ticket. So if there's a $200 ticket, then that person has to pay $250. And that $50 goes to the warrant officer. And so just in June, the city brought in about $10,000 of otherwise that we would not have received if the warrant officer weren't going and knocking
Didn't
on
exist,
doors or
yeah.
making phone calls.
And do our officers have to go after them? So our police department go after them, or can any police agency turn them in to us, or how does that work?
Our active police officers cannot do that. It's basically our warrant officer goes after them. Shad can explain a little bit better.
I think what you're asking, Councilman, is do our officers make arrests based on our city warrant? basically.
Oh.
Can they or do they, right? That's kind of where.
Yeah, like if these guys
Yeah,
don't show
yeah.
up, they're in our jurisdiction, so they don't show up.
Yeah, yeah.
Can't, if they're running the street somewhere in Houston, would that be on a record that there's a warrant for their arrest?
So our warrants are municipal warrants, so it's kind of tricky.
You have a mic.
Simplify this. We lean more towards collection than arrest, right? So our warrants will typically sit until served. We don't actively go put people in jail. Here's the reason. If I were to go out and pick a bunch of people up, you would be on the hook for the jail $50 a day, basically. We'd be paying $50 a day to put somebody in jail to sit the ticket off. Whereas we prefer to send it to collections. Now, there's a hold on their driver's license renewal, which is a pretty good burden when you go to renew your license and they go, by the way, you owe Hollywood Park money. You have to go do that first, then you come back and get your license. If not, you don't get your license. That's generally when they see them is like, oh crap, I went to get my license and they said I have a warrant. That problem usually solves itself, and if it doesn't, the warrant officer is the one going out. Now, if he had to make an arrest, we could do it, but we don't do that.
Yeah. But there's a certain percentage, I guess, that of tickets that don't get paid. Is what I'm getting at again.
Oh, yeah.
So, okay.
Oh, yeah.
There are plenty of people that don't show up. We kind of go with a percentage of people that we know is probably going to show up, depending on the docket. So if there's,
Yeah.
the docket size is
Big.
246, we know 246 people will not be showing up. So we can go with about 40% of that.
Yeah, that's fair. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. Ryan, City Attorney's report.
The only thing I have to report is just some, so the council's aware, some changeover on the firm side with some personnel. Behind me is Miss Natalie Thame. She's one of the new associates. I have a couple of other new ones that are joining the firm, so you may see their names or may see their faces. A familiar face that you may, that you'll definitely be seeing again, Mr. Michael McCann. He's actually been promoted to a senior associate, and so he's been with me almost. I think he's a 7-year lawyer, and so he's kind of hit a certain threshold, and he's been with me basically the longest. So, just a FYI for council, you may see some new names and some new faces that are kind of cycling in with the others.
Okay.
Would you repeat her name, please? I couldn't hear.
Natalie.
All right. Any questions for Ryan? All right. Thank you, Ryan. Moving on to the mayor's report. Again, the 4th of July parade was great. Thank you to the HPCA and all the work they did in putting that on. That was really enjoyable. It was really fun to get everybody out there together. And it was my job's easy because I just follow Shad. So if he gets lost, it's his fault. So, yeah. Also, I'd like to, the town has lost a former council member and longtime resident, David Swan, and just ask that you guys would remember his family in your prayers as they grieve his loss. And then finally, I'm going to give the rest of my time to Randy Tomasini as he addresses the update on the chronic wasting disease with the deer.
All right. I guess if most of y'all have heard by now that one of the deer that we harvested during our deer control project in January tested positive for CWD. We don't know exactly where it came from. We don't know, where they're looking at it, trying to figure it out. I was contacted by Texas Parks and Wildlife. We've been working with them since then, working on a game plan, and they've come up with they've got a plan that's actually under their control. In the meetings, talking with them, they're pretty positive about the way we've been managing our herd and like I said, they have some recommendations. They gave us, I think y'all were distributed the chronic wasting disease in Bear County, the handout that they prepared for it. It was for the whole county, but for us too. One thing that has happened is, and will be, I guess, official in August when they have their next commission meeting, is the Hollywood Park, the containment zone that they have set up tentatively will be 281 to 1604 up to Blanco Road down to Bitters back to 281, which means no carcass live deer or any part like the brainstem, anything can leave that area. And then the surveillance zone that they've proposed is a much bigger area. It's actually about 35,000 acres, which includes both Harburger Park and McAllister Park into it, which for us doesn't mean a whole lot other than it will allow them, they're going to start doing more testing for CWD and see if it is out there and maybe came in from that way, like I said, because they don't know. As of the time that we tested positive, the only testing that's been done in Bear County was Camp Bullis and then us. And we've been doing it ever since they've required CWD testing, so probably 15 years. So we have a history of testing, and we haven't had one come back positive, but in this case we did. A couple of the things that they have brought up, like I said, about our program is it won't affect our program a whole lot. For us to just continue on our management plan the way we've been doing it. And they did assure us at present, at the time, they weren't coming in to do any depopulation, so that, which they do on breeder facilities and other private ranches they have done. But we'll just continue to monitor every fatality that we have between, since then, of a deer that's 1 year or older. So far, we've only had 2 reported, and I've taken samples on both of them, and the state will come pick it up, and I haven't heard back on them yet, which probably means they were non-detect, or we would have heard back from them by then about it. As far as our moving forward, one of the recommendations that they had was that we encourage and have our citizens to stop the feeding of the deer because it controls well, I can read it from here. Supplemental feeding of wildlife can increase the spread of the disease and result in a habituation to the humans. For this reason, Texas Parks and Wildlife does not recommend feeding wildlife, which means it just brings, if we have certain areas that feed all the time, it brings the deer know that. They come there, they get closer, and by the way, it's spread by contact being one of the main ones. It just increases our chance of, spreading it faster. It's going to most likely continue naturally, but we don't want to try to increase the spread if we can help from it. Again, if anybody, has a deer or an issue, call me. We'll address it. Then, like I said, I think y'all got their recommendations that were for it, and then I think y'all have read those, looked at those, and then there's some on the back counter if you don't. And that's kind of where we stand right now.
Yeah, just to help out a little bit, they came in, some people, if you listen to the Deer Committee meeting, you heard, they don't know, and they probably won't ever know how it got in here, where it came from. The suggestion is, when I read this at last council meeting, is that if they had to name a source, they would point towards supplemental feed that was brought in, that was contaminated. They asked that we not continue to supplemental feed the deer, because the idea is as they congregate together at feeding areas and they have tissue to tissue contact, that's the most likely way it's going to spread. And so as a matter of conservation, we don't want the deer congregating. Particularly, they're going to congregate in feeding areas and watering areas and those kind of opportunities. So for the sake of the herd and conserving the herd, they corrected me. I called it preservation. They wanted to call it conservation, so it's fine. Is that we don't do that. And it's a hot button issue in Hollywood Park. It predates any of us here being on this council. But they haven't. There were some opportunities within I'm going to play both sides of this. There was opportunities within the Deer Committee meeting for them to say, we are going to prohibit feeding. We're going to put a ban on it. They had more than one opportunity to do that. They did not do that. They did, however, suggest strongly, if you want to conserve your deer, don't feed them artificially. Don't supplementally feed them. Let them disperse. Because that congregating is where that spread is where that contagion is going to take place. At this point, like I said, as Randy pointed out, they will be monitoring, we'll be testing. I guess at one point we used to send fawns out that were abandoned to refuge, to
Correct, rehab.
And we're not going to be doing that anymore. Any deer that are within dead or alive within the area stay in the area, so that's part of their containment. So Randy will have to be bottle feeding fawns and whatnot here shortly if you run across them.
No.
Oh, you're not going to do that?
Well,
is there a
and
volunteer opportunity for that?
I've already, when we initially had this, when they called me, in March, we were getting ready to come into the fawn season when I was notified. And I did contact the state. I did ask them about us rehabbing our own fawns, because I knew we weren't going to be able to send them out. And the issue with that, and asked them about me getting certified to rehab as a rehab center, but only for Hollywood Park. We wouldn't take anything from outside. Nothing. The issue with that is they can't be moved because we're in the containment zone. They can't be released onto another property, so we can't take them off. In a ranch situation, there's one owner that would own the whole thing. So he's not releasing them to another property. I can't take the fawn from the property it's on, bring it to City Hall to rehab it, and then release it to another property.
Okay.
So we will not be able.
Okay, well, that's good. That's a change.
Rehab.
That's a change.
I mean, that's a change, but that is
Okay.
an issue. I checked into that, and we're not allowed to do it.
And just so you know, on that issue too, they recommend if you get a chance, go watch the Deer Committee meeting. The Deer Committee is going to be putting out information. The temptation is to always, you'll see the fawn and you don't see the mother around, and the temptation is to start caring for that fawn or taking it in. Do not do that. Almost in every situation, the doe is around. She's out of sight, but she's around, and so as tempting and as cute as those fawns are, they're not abandoned. Oftentimes they get reported, hey, we have an abandoned fawn. No, they're not abandoned. The mother is around. So anyway, keep that in mind as this is going on. And are you done? Okay, let's open up to questions for the council.
How do you contain them from crossing over 281?
How to what?
How do you keep them
Well,
contained?
we don't, and that's not anything we can control.
Right.
But yeah, they do go and cross. They cross back and forth on the Donella overpass. I've seen it. Most of y'all might have witnessed it, but yeah, I've seen them. And we can't do that. And they know. So there is going to be some influx, but we can't take them like they stopped us from doing the relocation 2 years ago, where we would dart them and relocate them to other. They stopped that, and so but them moving by themselves, we can't with the fawns, with our overpopulation, we can't move them
We can't move
outside
them
of
out.
the-
We don't,
Correct.
we've never had a containment management opportunity. We don't have one now. We're not responsible to make sure they don't cross.
Yeah.
Yeah, he just said this is the containment area.
It
and
is.
I was like, how you gonna do that?
Well, I mean, that we can't take them out.
Okay.
We can't physically
We can't
remove
relocate them and remove
from
them
the. Now,
to-
nature does what it does, but we
Got it.
can't physically.
Okay.
Not legally, we cannot move them outside. Yeah.
Yeah. Randy, you mentioned you tested a few. How often are you doing routine testing of the deer in the neighborhood?
Well, we do postmortem testing, so when
That's
the deer
all?
gets
Okay.
dilled, we do it. And actually, bringing with the fawns, we did one of the does that I did test last week. We picked up off of Ruta Mata, did have twins fawns. Now but we've been keeping an eye on. They're a little bit older fawns, and they've been on Avenida del Sol for the last week. We drive by and I've been watching them, and they're staying in that area. But so far they're doing fine.
Can they be tested
No, not
before they die, or is that not?
No, yes, they can't. The state does allow antemortem testing, but not for wild deer. It's only for deer breeders that it's accepted. All of ours is postmortem, and the deer we test now, before it was 18 months and older, but now that we've had a case, they lower it to basically a deer that doesn't have spot, 1 year old or older. So a deer that doesn't have spots, we will test, take samples and send in.
I guess where I'm going, it's kind of like drug testing in the workplace. I mean, is there a way to test it randomly to just our deer in general and get an idea that
Postmortem.
that's the only way? Okay.
You saw the process of what they do to test.
Yeah.
It
can't.
makes sense.
Okay.
Where they take the sample from
Okay.
is the problem.
Yeah, the deer, it's why it's postmortem. It's usually either the pharyngeal nodes or the brainstem.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, it's not.
It's not really possible. It's tough.
No, well, and it just antemortem isn't approved for
Sure.
wild deer. It's for deer breeders, but we can't use it.
Any other questions for Randy?
I know you test for, or you remove lymph nodes, I'm assuming.
I take the samples, correct.
How many other deer committee members do that as well? Or is it
At one
typically
time, we had
you?
when we first started doing it, we had most of the deer committee went to, and Kelly does it too. We get people certified, and then but the issue too is, and they had a lot of the testing training, but because it was new and they were opening it up, but now that it's kind of saturated, there's quite a number of them, but we're going to get more of them certified as soon as they usually notify me when they're going to have a class, and it's in the area. They have them, but they're across the state.
So typically, for example, the last two tests that you did post-mortem, did you do it by yourself, or did you call
Yeah.
a deer committee member, or does it
No,
just kind of depend?
I do it, and then I keep the samples and call parks. Now that they're responsible for the testing, I'll call them and they'll come pick it up and they send it in, and the city doesn't incur the expense. Now we will incur the expense, like this fall or in the winter if we remove deer again, or under our TTP permit, we will, for those up to 15 samples, we will have to pay for those, but all of the incidents before then, the state will pay for those.
Randy, just for clarification, and technically, if we want to talk about it this way, those deer belong to the state, correct?
Correct.
They are under the state jurisdiction. TPW has authority over how we handle those
Sole
deer.
authority, correct.
Okay.
Yeah, anything we do, it's with permission from them. Even the trapping and processing, when we did the triple T, we send in a request. I'm going to do we approved it the last deer meeting. We're going to get the TTP permit established or approved. We can vote later to whether we're going to use it or not, but the process takes about 60 days or so. So instead of wait until January or something like that, and then we get into next year to get it, it'll let us move forward and be ready if we're going to do it. And but we'll have it in place, ready to go.
The slideshow that the Texas Parks and Wildlife presented, I came to the meeting. It was very informational. The data was very clear and succinct, and I did also walk away understanding that their recommendation is for the preservation, or what's the word they want us to use?
They want
Conservation of our deer, is to stop supplemental feeding. Clearly, that is something that is tender to a lot of our residents, and I understand that. The presentation itself, has that been something that can be sent through Get Connected so we can bring awareness to the residents so they have the ability to watch the presentation themselves? Some people don't watch the Deer Committee, they'd be more apt to see it through Get Connected. Is there some proactive way that we can?
I know I posted their presentation or the video of the presentation on social media. I haven't tried a video through Get Connected, but I can look into that. Never thought about that.
Could you speak up, please?
Sorry, I haven't tried. Let me move my microphone. I haven't tried the video through Get Connected before. It's because it's a large amount to send or a link to it, but I'll think of the best way to do that.
I know the Deer Committee was going to consider, or at least they talked to me. I was asked about it afterwards if we can put something in Sparks as well about it. I don't know what all we want to include in Sparks or what that availability is.
I generally would put in what that letter says.
Yeah,
that's what I was
ideally,
thinking.
I think this
Just a
answers
letter.
the majority of everybody's questions. It was
right.
very well, it was put together very well.
And that, I believe, is a letter I read the last council meeting as well.
Correct.
Yeah, it's the same
chronic
one.
waste and disease in Bexar County. They put it together with, like I said, with us in mind. It's going to include a larger area.
Sure.
But like I said, they've been real upfront and telling us what they're going to do.
Yeah.
and involving us in it.
I think something for all of us to understand too is it's their first engagement, it's TPW's first engagement in an urban deer population.
Correct.
And so they are kind of walking gingerly and trying to figure out how that dynamic works here. And so I say that just to say they may come up with some other changes. They may change course on how they want to remediate or deal with that. But right now they're just kind of stepping into it.
And a lot of it will be based on whether we do get more positive samples, and as we take samples as deer get hit by cars or whatever, we find them and take those samples. We start showing up with a lot of them, well, it lets them know that it is prevalent here, not just a isolated case. It's
well,
here.
and we hope they get their testing program off the ground in that broader area.
Oh, correct.
Too.
Yeah, and it might,
that they can
it
see
might
if
show.
it might show up a lot at McAllister Park or something like that too. And
we may not be the exception.
Right. Correct.
It could be all. We don't know.
We don't know.
Say that, and they're not excited, but they're.
Well, they're biologists. They're excited.
They're optimistic about getting more samples. Being allowed to take more samples and really get a feel for what's going on.
They did mention that also, just so you all know, that COSA, City of San Antonio, is considering some sort of, I don't know if an ordinance is the right word, but some sort of management of it too. So we'll see. I'll be making contact with John Courage's office, which is across the road, talk about what if anything they've got in the works over there. There is something working through their council about it. So anyway, any other questions for Randy?
Don't forget the fawn census is Thursday.
Yes, fawn census is this Thursday.
Okay.
And I'd say just we're counting, gives us an idea.
Sure.
We don't have enough data yet to really search back at it, but it kind of gives us to build some history and watch it.
Randy, as the deer manager that we hire, overall picture from you after hearing the Texas Parks and Wildlife presentation, do you follow along the line? Obviously we know we are under the authority of the Texas Parks and Wildlife.
Correct.
And if they're saying supplemental feeding is we all know that it's 100% effective and leads to death, correct? If
CWD?
CWD, I'm sorry.
Correct.
Yes.
And it'll eventually, like this doe that tested positive, she was a mature doe, probably 6 or 7 years old. very healthy, weighed 95 pounds. I mean, showed no signs of anything. Now, whether it would have killed her, it depends on when she contracted it. She might have died of old age and never showed a sign, but she has the ability to pass it on. That's one of the issues with it that they're trying to understand and get a grip on is how many of them are actually dying from it.
Right. And like I said, they're even in other states where they're dealing with it, they're trying out management practices. And so everybody needs to keep in mind they may change their mind on how to handle it.
Yeah.
And so they're developing their protocols right now. So everybody kind of stay flexible with that. And
Right.
they are the TPW's deer. They belong to the state, and so we will be following their lead in this regard. So.
But yes, you're correct in the feeding. It's everybody. The best thing for the population is to not do it.
All right, Randy, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, after that fun news, moving on to citizen participation. Susie Wilkins, would you please come forward and state your name and address? And give me a second to get a timer going. Okay, go ahead.
My name is Susie Wilkins. I live at 208 Vista Robles. I've been in Hollywood 45 years. I've been in Hollywood Park 45 years. I obviously love it here. When I saw on the agenda there was going to be discussion about the lane policies for lap swimmers, as people are making these decisions, I thought that I like speaking for myself instead of having other people speaking about how I feel. So I came with just a few thoughts. I don't need a lane to swim. We have a wonderful facility. There are people who want lanes. That's fine. I don't need one. I can swim around kids, under kids. As long as I get my exercise in, I'm happy, and they usually enjoy it. There's been some mention about it being dangerous for more than one person to lap in a lane, or several people lapping in a lane. I did a little research, and it turns out that the team members on our swim team and other swim teams, I've actually witnessed myself, my son was on our aquatics team, will lap with anywhere from two to three, or 7 to 8 kids in a pool, depending on how many are needed. If it's dangerous, that wouldn't be happening. We use exactly the same equipment that the team members are using. As far as controversy and problems going on, it's been stated that at the Northeast Sports Park on Wetmore or at Blossom Park that there's no problems going on, but those are strictly lap and exercise pools. There's no families coming to picnic or bringing parties or kids or grandchildren or so on. So we have a different purpose with this pool than we do with the others. Lastly, I feel personally, this is my own feeling, I'm not speaking for anyone else, that if we end up with 2 lanes in a pool, that's 30% of our pool. If the lappers end up using 2 lanes in a pool, that's 30%, 33.3% of our pool. Everybody at that pool is paying the same fees that I'm paying. If it was going to be perfectly fair, then it seems like I should be paying a sixth of that, and I can't afford to do that. So as far as, the more lanes we have, the more that's taken away from the families that have come to use the pool for their recreation, and they're paying the same amount of money that I'm paying. So my feeling is I cannot see demanding more pool space when I'm paying the same amount of money that everybody else is. That's pretty much all I have to say. Were there any questions?
No, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Bruce Graham. State your name and address, please.
Bruce Graham, 134 Canyon Oaks. I sent an email midnight 09 on Wednesday morning to all of you. I know 3 of you received the email because I heard from you. I found out that placing something on the agenda according to a new ordinance, if I'm reading Glenda's email correctly, now has to be done 1 week and 2 hours before the meeting by ordinance. That you guys apparently made that ordinance, which limits you from taking what could be considered immediate action on an item. The item I'm talking about is the temperature of the pool, which by the time the next meeting occurs, the pool will be open for 8 days. 2 weeks, or maybe, no, 12 days. Weekends only after the next meeting. I have a good plan for installing an aerator system off the existing solar system. The existing solar system, if what I was told is correct, is trying to be implemented as a cooling agent at night. It's not working at all. I put a thermometer in the pool on the 15th. At 10 a.m. it was 88 degrees in the water. Air temperature was 85. At noon, it had gone up to 90 degrees. The air temperature was 94. At 3 o'clock, it was 91.7. The air temperature was 100 something. At 5:20, the temperature of the water was 92. Air temperature was around 104. I know it's hot outside. A couple of weeks ago, I noticed while swimming, hot water coming out of the inlets. I always thought those were outlets, but according to pool people, those are inlets. Water's coming into the pool. It's coming in hot. The only way water is coming in hot during the day is if it's going up through the solar system during the day. I was told that it was not. A few weeks later, after the 4th of July, I was at the pool, water coming out of the inlets extremely hot on all of them. Called Kelly, he said he'd come right down. I waited an hour, never saw him. Apparently he did come about 15, 20 minutes after I left. From what I was told, he went into the pump room, came back out, told my daughter who was in the pool, tell your dad everything's fine, everything's working fine. The next day, and since then, no hot water coming out of the ports. So, kind of coincidental. If nothing else is going to be done, at least turn that system completely off because it is having no effect. Aerators, I sent you an email, Googled, you could read about it. Hopefully some of you actually did. Obviously, I wanted it on the agenda tonight so that I wouldn't be wound out here after 3 minutes. I think we could have had a good discussion. I think taking the existing pump system, putting a valve that shuts it off on the roof, putting a T-section with a couple of nozzles, we could be pumping from the pump straight out through the air. And if you'll read the addresses or the Google information, not only will it have a cooling effect, it could be running from the time the pool closes until the time the pool opens, which is half the day. You'll also have better use of your chemicals. I know we've had issues with the chlorine in the pool being down to unreadable, unmeasurable because of the heat. I went back, I found an email from 2020 that I sent regarding this exact issue. The heaters were running, not the gas heaters. If they weren't on and the water's coming out hot, it might be beneficial to Kevin and his Aquatica program during the winter to just let the pumps heat the water up. But the pumps don't heat the water up. Something is not right. Somebody needs to look into it. And waiting until the 15th of next month to have it on the agenda, it's too late. I'll be happy to discuss my plan with anybody, anytime.
Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you.
I'm going to get your middle name mixed up, I think, but I'll do my best. Esther Cabrera? Yes. Okay. Could you please come forward? Name and address, please.
Yes. My name is Esther Cid Cabrera. I live in 125 Antler Circle at the Enclave. I have been living here for 20 years, and I'm a very frequent swimmer, and I try to go almost every day. Well, I have some issues around. My English is not very good, but, excuse me, but good enough to communicate with you. And when they raised the fee, I understand because everything is raising, the prices and everything. But I was a little bit disappointed when I get to the pool and I saw that the pool is always nice and is a paradise. But there's some things that I thought they were going to put some money around the landscaping, or maybe there's not enough budget for that, but the plants, some of them, they are dead since the beginning of the season and they're still there. So there's little details. The price is just, I heard about the raise in the price and the people, but I don't see the same faces. I have been there 20 years ago, and I see few less people. I think it's not about the money only, it's about the people that they are going over there. Lots of my friends around Hill Country, they cannot afford that because, you know, with 3 kids and it's a lot of money to pay $20 each for the family, but that's okay for that. And also the maintenance of the pool, the water is, okay, it's hot, of course, but around the pool, I don't know who take care of that, but in the part of the baby pool, it's always dirt around. You only need a brush just to do it, and on the line where the bolts and the rope are, there are always a dirty line in each one since the beginning of the season. It's some very easy things to fix, just to put it. And my last concern is just about, I heard that Jennifer, the person who was at the pool, was fired, and I'm really very concerned about that because I don't know what happened, what was the problem. For me, and my personal, she was very nice, very friendly. She, for the first time in the 20 years, she always checked the bracelet, and everybody goes in. She is just checking because when the teenagers were just taking turns to be in the gate, they were just plugged in the cell phone. But she was doing for me a very good job, and I'm very concerned that she got fired. That's everything.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know this person. Debbie Truman. Name and address, please.
Debbie Truman, 228 Fleetwood. I'm here to talk about Memorial Park. In 2012, the then City Council officially changed the name of Triangle Park to Memorial Park in honor of former Mayor Bill Bolke and others who contributed to the town. Bill Bolke was the first mayor to have died in office, and that was the impetus that led to the creation of the memorial. After inducting Mr. Bolke as the first honoree to the memorial, that council created a process and criteria, and I know you love processes, and for selection of future inductees to be honored with a plaque at Memorial Park. One of the criteria is that the nomination must be supported with a written petition signed by a minimum of 500 adult residents. It's ultimately up to the city council to decide whether to accept the nomination and honor the resident. I'm going to be asking you to amend the ordinance establishing the qualifications to be honored at Memorial Park, and specifically the requirement to obtain 500 signatures on a petition. This figure is unrealistic based on our size and age demographic, and it is virtually unattainable. And by the way, that number was not a unanimous vote by that council. It was voted 3-2. There should be a high bar for the nomination process, but it must be reasonable and it must be attainable. Otherwise, it renders illusory the concept of having the park as a memorial to honor those who have made significant contributions to our town. I don't know the exact number for what a petition should be, but many times it's a percentage of the number that voted in the last election, like 20 to 30%, and then with a minimum number. And I'm hoping that Patrick and Ryan can help come up with a fair number for you to consider. In 10 years, no one has been nominated to be inducted into Memorial Park, and I'm going to be nominating David Swan for the honor. And there are others out there who are so deserving. So we need to set a realistic and fair bar so we can take advantage of the intent of the memorial. And I'm sorry that I cried. David Swan was really special to me. Thank y'all for all you do.
Thank you, Deb.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Margaret McGuire.
Sorry. This is the ordinance I'm wanting to. You have it. And that's one for all of you. Sorry.
This is the one that was adopted 10 years ago.
Good evening.
Good evening. State your name and address, please.
Yeah, Margaret McGuire, 230 Donella. Thank you. I've been hearing praises of what a good job the afternoon security guard has been doing. I'm here to say I'm in total disagreement. Last month, we had just found out about the one lap lane. I'm a lap swimmer. And we went that morning to swim. A woman in a bathing suit showed up too, and I thought she worked for Aquatica because she was inside the little office and she was helping out the lifeguards. So I assumed that she was probably an Aquatica employee, like, I've seen before, but she was different. Or was a parent. We got in the pool. We're an older couple with children. We're the only ones in the pool. Another friend showed up, and I was catching up. The woman in the suit looked at us and said she had the couple move over so we could swim. I was actually shocked since she had no business to do this since the couple was not even in the way. She created a problem that did not even exist. And I know because I have a lot of people when I've lap swam, I've done it for 20 plus years. And there are a lot of people don't want to move over for you, unfortunately. So, that was upsetting to me because I don't want to upset the couple. And it upset them. She then told the lifeguard, because my friend and I were continuing to catch up and talk. She told the lifeguard, well, we could hear her, that they're not even swimming after I helped them before all the family showed up. Which was, I blew it off, but that's the start of when I got a little, upset. So when, we started swimming, and when another person was finished and leaving, she approached us to let us know she had thanked the couple for moving over for us. That's when I had a confrontation with her, since I had found out in between times she was the off-duty security guard. I asked her 3 times, who are you? Nobody. I said, no, who are you? Nobody. Again, who are you? I'm just nobody. And I said, no, you're the off-duty security afternoon guard. and you have no business telling me or anyone else what to do. And she did not speak for me and to leave me alone. I had to tell her 3 times to leave me alone. I also asked where her wristband was, and she did not have an answer. She did not have a wristband to swim. And I thought that was kind of funny since, we all have to have them, and she's the one that checks for people to have them.
30 seconds, please. Sorry.
Okay. I then started swimming again, and she went straight to the couple to complain about me, and she said, which I'm pretty sure I was positive she heard, that she was a resident too and had a right to swim as well. I reported her to Kelly and said he said he would let another boss know. This woman that I finally found out is named Jenny is interfering with things that do not pertain to her job description and should not be bad-mouthing me, a resident, or any other resident, period. She's not doing her job correctly. I really appreciated Kelly returning my call promptly and reporting this matter swiftly. I also wanted to speak about his character, that he takes the time out to listen. I've never heard him yell or scream at anyone that I'm aware of. In my opinion, he is a very important asset to this town who works very hard to please everyone. Thank you.
All right. I think I know who this is, but I can't read the last name. It's John I can't read it.
Ovolio.
Ovolio, thank you. Please go forward.
Evening, Council. My name is John Ovolio, and I am the HOA president for the Gardens of Hollywood Park.
Address, please.
I'm going to hinge on one thing.
Can you state your address, please?
39 Amber Forest.
Okay, thanks.
And I want to bounce on the Public Works. Kelly, you and your folks, Angela, do a phenomenal job and support us at the Gardens whenever we need support. And I greatly appreciate it. And you return phone calls, and so does Angela. So that's my positive note. On the agenda is something that's a concern to the Gardens. The Gardens have 88 homes, and currently we have 4 rental homes. We also have 1 Airbnb. The concerns and the impacts that I have for the Gardens. On the agenda is short-term rentals. I know that Hollywood Park is looking at short-term rentals. I would like to be the voice of the Gardens to say that we in the Gardens are going to try to change our policy to a percentage of rentals for the Gardens. Given we have 88 homes, my intent is to do a percentage, and there will be no short-term rentals. If you're not going to stay for a year, you're not going to rent. That's a real issue, and it should be a real issue to every homeowner in Hollywood Park. The other concerns, impact to home values. Renters, I'm a mechanical engineer and I do a lot of construction. Renters have no skin in the game. Not all, but the majority have no skin in the game. Those of us that own have a lot of skin in the game. So when a renter comes in and they're enjoying their lifestyle and partying, the only thing we can do is call the police department on a recurring basis. That's really not the answer. These guys work hard, protect us. They don't have to have nuisance calls. That's just me. Airbnb, we're doing the same thing. We have 1 Airbnb. In the bylaws, we're going to reduce that. Grandfather that Airbnb in, and subsequently, no more Airbnbs. We don't want any Airbnbs. The one right now is in the end of a cul-de-sac, and I think the police department's called on a fairly regular basis when it's rented out for disturbances.
30 seconds.
And lastly but not leastly, Chief, you talked about taser. Is there any consideration in there for us mature people when you zap them with a taser?
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Okay. That's the only thing I need. Thank you, Counsel.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Are you going to be staying around for the conversation?
Yes.
Okay.
That's all the list I have. Patrick, do you have anything to be read?
Not for citizen participation.
Okay.
Just for the item.
The items specifically. Okay. All right. Thank you all. Go ahead. Come on. Yeah. All right. I understand. Got it. Thank you. Name and address, please.
Jennifer Schaefer, 14186 Shetland Way.
I'm sorry?
14186 Shetland Way.
Shetland, thank you.
Yes. Let me start by introducing myself, but I don't think I need to. I am the guard at night. That was released of her duties. I'm going to first address what she had said. I was swimming. I was not a guard. I was just a swimmer. So when she said who I'm like, nobody. And I was a nobody. And I did have a band on. It was on my bathing suit, but she didn't see it. And as a swimmer, I had asked, they were like all the ladies wanting to lane and swim and practice. And then there was an older couple with their grandchildren. And I don't mean little children. And they were roughhousing little shooting guns and all that. And as a swimmer, to be considerate, I said, hey, you know, we have this whole pool. Can, like, they play over there a little and just like let the ladies swim, you know, just because they all want to practice and exercise. And he said, sure. And then another mom came in and with her children, and I know her from coming in. I said, hey, they moved over to let the ladies swim just so they get a chance to do their laps because there's nobody here. And they come in the morning. Basically, it's quiet. And she said, oh, okay, sure. Yeah, that's great. So the couple had gotten upset, which I didn't know because they didn't tell me. They said, okay. And they told her, who is she to do that? And she says, well, I'm glad she told me. I'm glad she made me aware, actually, so I can tell my kids to move over, and this way nobody gets hurt. She goes, I actually appreciated her saying it. I wasn't offended. And that was what happened with that. Now, regards to Mr. Cohen, the whole letting go thing started because of wristbands, orange ones. I had called him, and then he texted him that we needed more wristbands. It was a Thursday. I had 25 bands left. I knew I was not going to have enough for the weekend, so I said, can you stop by and drop us off some bands? And he said, why do you need bands again? And I said, well, we do, because it's going to be the weekend. I know 25 is not enough. I mean, you got a family of 6, you're done. So he said, there's no way you should need more bands.
30 seconds, please.
People are sneaking in. I said, no, they're not. And he goes, I'll talk to you tomorrow in person. And he came down, and we had the discussion. And I told him, I said, no, you're not here. I am. I said, and I'm telling you, I know these families, and I know who comes in and out. I said, did it ever occur to you that maybe so many bands are out this year because there's more people and because you hired a security company, and me and my son are actually doing a really good job and making sure everybody has a band. Nobody goes through without a band, not even me. And I tried telling him, they're not sneaking. He said they found a loophole. They're sneaking. I'm like, this is not the community that's going to sneak in and be humiliated to try to save $10. It's just, it's not that pool. I said, they're not.
I'm sorry, we're just limited on time. Could you please?
And then he called my boss and told him to remove me of my duties because I was abrupt or whatever term he used. And I've literally had 3 conversations with Kelly since I've worked there. 3. How can I be a problem for him? I don't understand. And the community doesn't have a problem. And all I was doing with those ladies was trying to be helpful as a citizen who has a wristband. And I was nobody. I was just a considerate swimmer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't think there's any more citizen comment or citizen participation. Let's move on to the consent agenda. I'm sorry?
Andy, I've never been to one of these, but I did hear something that I thought maybe I wanted to comment on.
Please come forward.
Okay. I do know that
Mike, name and address.
Kendall Harper, 333 Meadowbrook Drive.
Okay.
I'm here because I was notified that the short-term rentals would be on the agenda, so if I need to wait until that's fine.
You can do it now or you can do it then.
Okay, well, he had mentioned a couple things, and I actually own Airbnbs. That's what I do for my profession along with real estate. And so I really wasn't planning on speaking, but I wrote a little notes because I wanted to address a couple of the concerns that were mentioned, which were parties. There are so many ways around not having parties, which is because I know I have several Airbnbs and they have had surprise parties at them. So any professional host has figured out how to get around that, and Airbnb and VRBO are both working extremely hard to knock parties out. They don't let people from San Antonio rent Airbnb in San Antonio anymore because that's kind of a red flag that it's someone in the area looking to have a party at a house. So there's one. But also as a host, you can do 2-night minimums if we wanted to, as a community of Hollywood Park, keep Airbnbs, which I'm in favor of. Because me and my husband, we Airbnb our house when we go to vacation on Christmas, and we'll rent it out for the week or for Thanksgiving. And so many families love that because then they get to come and stay in a house instead of a hotel for their family's Easter. Anyways, you can do a week if Hollywood Park wants to just set like a weekly town minimum. If you want to do it a week stay so that you're not having to, risk the parties, that's one way to get around it. Another concern was the home values. And as a purchaser of Airbnbs, let me tell you that Hollywood Park has now really taken themselves out of the Airbnb market because our home values fantastically have gone way too high. So to have a profitable Airbnb, you have to have a low mortgage. And with our, home values going so high now, it's unlikely that new Airbnbs will be coming into the town. So I'm in favor of grandfathering those. And if you've owned a home in Hollywood Park for so long, I feel like you've kind of earned that right, because Hollywood Park, as I've learned, I'm here 5 years and I didn't believe it, but everyone said people just hop houses, and that's so true, and I'll be one of them because I'm never moving out of Hollywood Park. But I feel like those citizens of Hollywood Park have kind of earned the option to do that with their home. So I don't think an issue of new Airbnbs buying up the community, it's not going to happen. Our home values are way too high, and the only way you're going to cover a mortgage is if you pay cash or pay almost nothing for your mortgage. So that's one thing. And I think those are really the only ones that I wanted to address, because I know everyone thinks Airbnbs, parties, we're going to get bought out of the neighborhood and you're not going to like the neighbors. But there are so many ways around that. If you do your nightly stay, if you do a minimum home price, the higher the price you set per night, the more likely you're going to kind of get out some of those worst tenants. So that's all.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Will you be staying around for the conversation? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, come on.
Thank you so much.
Sure. Name and address, please.
Sure. Sabrina Drury, 126 Tiger Tail. I've been a long-time resident, 38 years. We've been to the pool pre-renovation and now, and we just love it. It's so great. My family lives here, and they go to the pool too. And I've lived here a long time, and in years past, we'd have bands, and we would just kind of float through and just say, we're with them, and just get in. And, you know, we did have bands, but I didn't have it on and all that. Since Jenny Schaefer has been the employee that has been in charge of checking bands, I have to say we never go through without every single person in our party, and sometimes that's 12 people between our family and guests, and we pay for the extra bands. And my grandson was swimming at the pool. He's 7 years old, and he had a band on his foot. That's where a lot of the kids wear them because their wrists are so tiny. And his slid off because he's really small, and it was gone. And Jenny got up and made an announcement around the pool. It's like, does anybody see an extra band? And sure enough, a mom had found one, but hadn't turned it in yet at the time. But had my daughter not gotten the band back, she would have had to pay another $100 for a band, I believe. Maybe I'm wrong, to get a replacement band, but it's fairly expensive. But she's been putting the paper bands on the kids, even the 2-year-old, my 2-year-old and 3-year-old grandchild, so that everybody is a band, and my 7-year-old grandson, so that he wouldn't lose it. So she's just been so great to our family and so kind, and has just taken great care. We use the baby pool a lot, and when the chlorine isn't right, she really calls to try and get people to fix it so that we can swim in it with our little ones. But in all the years I've been here, she's just been the nicest person that has worked at that position, and I feel like done the best job in that position of anybody I've ever known. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't see any hands. I think we're going to go forward. All right. Thank you all. Moving on to the consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve for approval of the minutes for the June 20 City Council meeting and acceptance of the financial statements as of May 31st, 2023?
I so move.
We have a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And so it passes. So we move on to new business. Discuss and consider approval of an addendum to the agreement with Hollywood Park Swim Team regarding the clarification of the swim lane policy for lapsed swimmers. Is there a citizen comment on this?
Mayor, I've got one email.
Okay.
That was asked to forward to council, but she also requested it be read. She could not attend. This is from Barbara Schmitz. She may have spoken last month, I believe, on that issue. I'll read it in whole. HP recently lost a most respected, fair, and approachable city council member. This council person had no agenda except to serve all of the citizens of Hollywood Park. He would listen to all sides and seemed to always make the right decisions. He served not only the young families of Hollywood Park, but those older citizens in HP who formed this community. He was David Swan. Now it seems as if some members of City Council have a personal agenda and maybe even a conflict of interest. Again, I am speaking for lap swimmers. The best solution would be for the swim team to practice from 7 to 10 a.m. Okay, swim team. I know you don't want to get up an hour earlier as other teams do, so parents, please compromise. Your kids can have the entire pool to themselves if you would have your kids swim from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. After 10, there would be 2 lanes for lap swimmers and the rest of the pool for families. Remember, lap swimmers also pay. For safety reasons, sharing with more than 2 lap swimmers presents a danger because there is a solid wall that has no give. Also, the older adults that have artificial joints, which if hit by another swimmer, child playing and not paying attention or hitting the pool wall, could have severe medical consequences. So council members, please think of all your residents like David Swan did, not just young families or swim team families. My kids swam for Hollywood Park and there was never, never a problem. Thank you.
All right. Todd, you want to address the issue on the Hollywood Park swim team?
In general, on this item, I know this was brought up. This is just to memorialize what y'all discussed last month on adding the addendum to the agreement.
Yeah, we just brought it up last month because there was nothing in writing. It was very vague in writing.
Okay.
And so, right?
Yeah.
And so Ryan came back with something a little more specific that seems to reflect what we discussed. To me, it felt logical to have lap swimmers share a lane, and even one of the lap swimmers said we should teach the kids to share. So Ryan went and clarified that on paper, and I read through this. I like it. It's really all I got.
Any comment among council?
I mean, I'll just say in response to the citizen comment that we've already got an agreement in place with the swim team with respect to hours, and we're not looking to reinvent the wheel here and renegotiate a signed contract that they're paying for. So to me, that's sort of a non-starter. I have no problem with the amendment or the addendum.
First, I want to just respond to the citizen's comment, and we are so sorry to hear about the loss of a past council member. So please know that we appreciate you keeping us informed about that, and we just let the family know that we appreciate his service to our community. Every person is very valuable in our city, and we appreciate all the comments that come our way. I appreciate what this resident said. But in my mind, I will say that it's, the times that I have swam laps in gyms, it's very common to share lap lanes. And so I'm for the new amendment to this particular agreement where 2 lap swimmers need to share. And if we have 3 or more, then we'll move to the second lane.
4 or more.
4 or more? You're right. I remember that incorrectly. So 3 or more moves to 4 or more. So 3
shares.
to a
4
share lane. Okay.
opens a new one.
It goes to a fourth,
Then it goes to the second lane.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any comments about that? I was thinking about something different. I thought it was 2, and more than 2 would go to a second lane.
Are there any comments about the addendum from anybody else on council?
I support the amendment.
Okay.
And Mayor?
Sure, go ahead.
Just so y'all know, that is what we do in open swim also. So
That's what, I'm sorry?
the 3 or more is the way we do the open swim
Oh,
also.
so if we went at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you're saying it would look like what this addendum says?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Thank you. That's helpful.
All right. Do we have a motion to approve the addendum?
I motion to approve the addendum.
We have a second.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any in opposition? All right, it passes. All right. Discuss and consider approval of an ordinance creating Chapter 9 of the Code of Ordinances establishing a Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. Patrick.
All right. The idea has been broached about creating a parks board. I recall last month's agenda had most of the agenda was about park-related issues. So the idea had been batted around a little bit about why don't we just have some of those issues having that filter, I guess, before they come to council. So a parks board is the short version I'm calling that. Parks and Recreation Advisory Board would review items about all 3 parks, basically, and have some purview over that, specifically non-operational issues at the park, but just to make sure. So, for example, if we had an agenda item prior to that, we'd say, well, has it gone to the Parks Board? What, have they weighed in? And they're all and that this ordinance is drawn up so that the local stakeholders would be involved in that, so that it's across the spectrum. Everybody has their own little representation within a board.
It's not dissimilar to what we've done in the past, obviously. When I've had the comment given to me, at least at this time of year, we're apparently a pool with a town attached to us. And the council often gets put in the crosshairs of, obviously, as we even see tonight, a number of competing issues. And not dissimilar to what the Deer Committee, why it was formed. There's an opportunity to, and I personally have been involved in a number of meetings about the pool. And the idea was to put together a committee that represented all the relevant stakeholders. So you've got HP Swim Team, you've got HPCA, you've got Public Works, you've got the Garden Club, you've got the different clubs that use the Voight Center. We needed a place to where we could filter those conversations and those needs and those wants and those desires, and have that start to get worked through before it ever got to council, where all the relevant stakeholders were already engaged, and we've reached a consensus of some sort of what we're going to take to council as recommended. Because often what will happen is you'll have one of those groups that will come forward, we want this, and then the council will be engaged in that opportunity, and you'll have another stakeholder come up, hey, well, I didn't know you guys were doing that. We want to be involved in that. Hey, we have something to say about that. And so you end up getting the situation where we're caught. There's so many stakeholders down at the park that we need to find a place where they can all get together, and they can all kind of throw things against the wall and talk to each other and work together. Because at the end of the day, all the groups have to work together anyway. Public Works has got to work together with the swim team, has got to work together with the HBCA, has got to work together with the Garden Club. So the idea, and this was Dale's idea from last council meeting, it's a really good one, is to get all those stakeholders in a room and start having them hash these opportunities out. They come to a consensus of what they want, and then those are delivered to council. So a lot of the turmoil that has come up in the past about that is hopefully taken care of there. So a lot of that's been washed through before it ever gets to council. So that's the idea behind it, and the idea behind how it's written and organized. So anyway, just feel free to discuss it, but that's the idea.
If I may add one other thing, I think I mentioned it in an email. The idea is if the board is created, okay, then that's just the creation. And then I would go through the regular board appointment process, application process, and appointment process. So the board would be created and put out information, or the clarion call, if you will, to accept applications, and then we get the applications and they write on there that they're applying for the Parks Board, and we can clarify and vet those, and then bring those to a subsequent council meeting, and then as you can imagine, that would be, y'all could sift through those based on those stakeholder positions, make those appointments, and then they would get going. They have their first initial meeting, kind of get to know each other, pick their officers, all that kind of stuff, really get them off the ground going. And by the way, because we have a handful of boards, this would fall in line with the appointment process timeline that the EDC has. So it's really easy to maintain, because right now we're seeking applications for the EDC. Right? We could seek applications for the Parks Board, and people could decide which one they want to be on.
Ryan, do you want to comment on this, since you were obviously heavily involved in putting this together?
Well, basically, what we put together was what the council's discussion was last time with that direction. Having been with Hollywood Park kind of on and off since I think my original appointment was 2005, so it's quite a while ago. The aspects with regard to different things that have happened with regard to the pool comes up all the time. And as the mayor said, sometimes you'll get people coming up, and the discussion at council level is, well, did you talk to the swim team, or did you talk to this other stakeholder? Did you talk to so-and-so? And so it delays things, or it had in the past. And so you're putting them together, as the mayor said, at the start. And you either get it to a point where you have a consensus, or if there are hotly contested issues, the council gets kind of an understanding up front and in advance of things that have been worked through before it comes to council. And so the way boards and commissions usually work like this that are advisory is there's only so many of you and there are only so many hours in the day for you guys to do things. And so they help with the collection and the discussion and kind of the heavy lifting on very specific topics. You know, that's what your P&Z board does. That's what your tree committee does. That's what your deer committee does. And so this just falls in line with that. The aspects of, as Patrick said, this creates the board. I'll comment a little bit just so there's no misunderstanding. We listed under the section for responsibilities different things. That's more of an authority section. So that's like the outer boundaries of the things they can do. They don't have to do all those things unless something comes up, in which case they already have the ability to do them if they're triggered. Just because you have listed the authorities and things they can do doesn't mean they always have to do it, but they have options for doing those. But it's up to the council what you want to leave in, what you want to take out, how you want to change it. This is like the first draft based on what you guys gave me last time.
I've got a question, Ryan, if I may.
Yes, sir.
Obviously, I like the idea of an advisory board. The Voight Center now is so much more expanded over what we had 10 years ago that getting citizen input and stakeholders, and I like the fact that we have the stakeholders involved, or we're asking them to put it. So does the swim team have 2 or 3 people that are members of the swim team apply for the position and we pick from those? Or do people just come up and apply and say, well, I'm on the swim team, so that's who I'm representing? So we go through those organizations, they submit a few names.
That's a good question, right. Yeah, I think I understand that. The way I pictured it would be, you know, multiple people would say, I'm with the swim team or associated with the swim team, whatever, representative of the swim team, and they'd sign up for that slot. And then we would take those, I would take those applications, confirm that information, and then when you're selecting for
But
that
I'm
slot,
assuming the swim team is going to say, these are 3 applications of members that want to represent the swim team on this advisory board. Is that what we're saying?
This ordinance doesn't address that part of the system.
Right.
It allows you to take in applicants from anyone and for them to select who they want to represent. But if the stakeholders, the members of the boards of those stakeholders, or the control group, for lack of a better word, of those stakeholders, say, well, we want this person to be the one that applies, they can do that, right? That how they want to present is kind of up to them individually, and then you guys decide, you know, like how you want to, you know, who do you want to point out?
They naturally
for
should
example,
do that,
like,
should they not?
That could happen with the swim team where, you know, on their board or their leadership, and they say, well, we want so-and-so to be the applicant. They can denote that on the application, right? And then, let's say another stakeholder, and here's why. One of them is kind of a mixed bag there. I can't remember the name. There's 4 or 5 groups there. And so you all could choose from that. Now, that's still, I don't know how to say that. You could still end up, for example, let's say the HPCA has a stakeholder slot there. Well, what if the board just can't decide, or they forget, or whatever, at some year? As an example.
My concern is use HPCA as an example. So the HPCA board gives us 2 names. These are who we want. One of these, city council, you pick them. Here's 3 people.
Sure.
You know, they're members in good standing. We would like them to represent us. But then we get 4 other applications. Well, I'm a member of HPCA. I want to represent them. But now they don't actually represent the HPCA. So that's what I'm trying to get clear in my mind. How does that work?
And part of it is, I'm not going to tell the HPCA, I would let them know, hey, we're accepting applications, but I'm not going to tell the HPCA, we need your stuff. If they didn't turn it in, what would we do, I guess? I've been in that scenario before where we're like, oh, we just didn't get around to nominating somebody on a different board a long time ago.
If they as a control group of HPCA, if they don't nominate anybody, then it's up to us
to pick.
Right, to pick.
Somebody that's a member of HPCA. I mean, obviously, but I'm
Yeah.
looking at the conflict side of it.
No, I understand. I imagine there's going to be a lot of interest in this board. I really do.
Okay.
And so let's say there's 10
I hope
for that
so.
one slot, okay? That'd be wonderful.
Wouldn't that be a nice problem to
Less,
have?
yes, it's a great problem to have. So if we had 10 people for the HPCA slot, okay, and I have all those applications slotted away, and then the HPCA says, but we want these two, the council would know that. This is what the HPCA recommends, this one person or these two or whatever. The others, or maybe they don't weigh in at all, but.
If they don't weigh in, that simplifies my.
Right, right. But I would like to have that option in case some group doesn't weigh in on
Yeah,
some version
it's
of that.
tough as a city to, in fact, not tough, it's, the city doesn't tell the community groups how to function, and we just don't. The idea from the city part, though, is you don't want to have stacked boards. You want to get,
Totally agree.
you want to get representation across the board. That's the whole purpose of them. And so there'll be some, I'm sure there'll be some opportunities at council when they go to appoint them going, okay, let's make sure we have an equally represented board, and we're going to have to choose from applicants. In the meantime, the city could, maybe Patrick or whoever could go, you guys have somebody, but that'll probably be the extent to which the city wants to engage with the communities about telling them what to do.
I do like the idea, though, of having each club sort of submit or nominate a person. That way we know, I mean, for example, HPCA, about 1/3 of the households are members of HPCA, and some people, I mean, they just show up to events, but they don't really know what goes on to put them on because they're not actively running the show, so to speak, and so they might not be able to speak super well to HPCA's concerns. Same with swim team. I mean,
But in that case, so that raises my question. Like, we pay dues at HPCA, and my wife probably knows what's going on, but I don't. And so if I applied, I cannot, like Glenna gets selected to represent HPCA, right?
Okay.
But just because I paid my dues, I can't fill that last slot, the grab bag slot, right? Because I'm a member of HPCA by paying dues, not by knowing anything.
The last group, the at-large position,
Right,
if you will,
at-large.
was just for those folks that don't fall in necessarily to any of those people,
Right.
any of those categories, which is still another,
Sure.
1,000 people or so.
Sure.
So we're hoping we can get one application.
that's what I was going to say. My concern is that there's a lot of groups here, and the people who most use the parks are members of at least one, maybe more.
Oh, I agree. Yeah.
And so what happens if we don't get anyone who applies who's not a member of any of those? I mean, can we make it a preference without being a requirement? And then the other question is, the way it's written, only one place, shall be held by a member of HPCA. Only one shall be held by a member of the swim team. A lot of people are in both of those. I mean, I understand. I think it would behoove us to word it differently so that there's essentially representation from each group, but you might be hard pressed to find someone who's a member of the swim team who's not a member of HPCA,
Pulled from their
who also
board.
applies for the board.
What if you're from the board of HPCA instead of just a member?
Well, maybe that would be a better way to say it.
I don't
Well,
always know.
let's take a step back. Ryan, is there a way for the city to solicit the community groups, asking them to submit appointments for those positions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
If
That
that's
might be a way around that too. That way you still have, even if somebody's a member of the swim team and HPCA, but they might qualify an at-large, they're not somebody who was selected by those community groups to represent them on the board. They for virtue of living here, they've got multiple interests in all of that, but they're not actually representing the HPCA or the HP
Yeah,
swim
they're not
team
speaking for
or
that.
Okay.
that position.
So then I think, we just have to say, you're allowed to be a member, but you're not representing this group for the at-large. Okay.
Right, yeah. I think I think
understand
the wording to change to
Sure.
so that you're doing that, and you don't end up with a stacked board. The section that says you can't be a member would basically mean you can't be nominated by more than one
Or you can't represent more
Well,
than.
you got to be. You can say I only represent one when in your mind you're aligned with more.
Right.
Sure.
And so that's kind of the thing you've got to be careful of.
We could also just see what applications we get. See how it goes.
Yeah,
And that's true.
It's. I think what we're talking about. You're not going to be able to get perfect here, right?
Right.
We're not going to be able to get that, but we're going to try to get it as representative as we possibly can.
And I just think the language needs to be modified
Sure.
to reflect that reality, because
Sure.
to try and come up with those 5 people and hope that they actually apply could be pretty tough, in my opinion. And could we also, you kind of touched on this, that section 9.3 responsibilities, before it lists A through F, can we change shall to may?
Yeah.
Okay,
Got it.
thanks.
Must be a
That's what I
lawyer.
get.
And then my last question is, it states that the commission shall comply with Texas Open Meetings Act. Is that absolutely required for an advisory committee?
No,
It's
if
a
you
best
are,
practice.
It is a best practice.
Okay.
Because you want to avoid what's called the rubber stamping scenario. This is where I don't imagine we'd end up with a rubber stamping scenario. But you don't want to put them in that kind of position. You don't want to put yourselves in that kind of position. So it usually is a best practice that they comply with the Open Meetings Act. But just like all of your boards, they would schedule a time to use your facilities for the recording and stuff.
I just think, this is something that kind of comes up. For example, like Mr. Graham talked about the pool issue. Well, it came up less than a week before our meeting. If they had more flexibility to meet when things arose I don't want it to become a thing where, first it goes to the advisory committee and then it goes to city council, and now we're just making every park-related decision take twice as long.
Aren't there? Correct me if I'm wrong, please. Can't committees also call special meetings as well?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure, they
All right.
certainly can.
They
All right.
can.
And they
Generally-
call emergency meetings when
Right.
necessary.
The reason I say best practices, it's better so that way people can be notified when meetings are and what's on their agenda, what's going to be discussed, and they'll kind of get into the rhythm of how they operate.
And they can get participation, because I imagine
Yeah.
the Pool and
Sure.
Parks Committee is going to get a lot of community participation. They're going to show up to the meetings
Right.
to
And ultimately,
talk.
they would vet through some of those ideas rather than just, I heard this, I heard this, I heard this, and then you're at a council meeting, and then you get even more input during the council meeting, and emails and everything else. A lot of that hopefully would be vetted so that some of the ideas and such have been a little bit thought through and discussed with people who utilize those facilities. That's what the stakeholder option's for.
Well, and that way council too can go, look, we have done our best to take in all the relevant information from all the relevant stakeholders, and you may still not like our decision, but we can at least fall back and go, and we have done everything we know to do to take in all that information and make a decision based on that. Because you get to a point where you sit up here and you go, yeah, I don't know, I know how to run my own pool. I know how to cool or not cool my own pool, but I don't know necessarily what works in a commercial pool and those opportunities. And yet you're getting fed those opportunities. Make a decision. Well, there's got to be a better way to do this.
Okay, so I have an idea of the language to change and bring back to you at the next meeting. I'd recommend you keep the Open Meetings Act requirement in there. I'll see if I can think of anything that couldn't allow easier communication with them.
Okay.
Between them while still complying. Because they are advisory, they can't.
They're not going to decide.
They're not going to decide anything anyway.
Right.
And
So everyone will always have the opportunity to come to a council meeting
Right.
and speak about that issue and hear what the board thinks.
It's a recommendation. on
The
certain
recommendation,
different-
right.
Okay. I'll have to do a little out-of-the-box thinking to see if I can address that.
Okay.
My recommendation is, by the way, just because I mentioned the timeline earlier, if the board's created tonight, it's a lot easier to get those applications and so forth and stay on that same timeline as the EDC. That way, the logistics side of it, by the way, there's some things I think of would kind of stay in line. So that's why I'm.
So that's the time. That's the time opportunity, right? Because we really need to be, even as a city council, and we've talked about this before, we really need to be having this stuff in front of us by January, to affect the season in a reasonable way, or
That's
even
just
sooner.
for the pool season, sure. But
Right.
the rest of the park things come and go at different times
Right.
for different reasons.
Patrick, Ben, I suggest that, I mean, if I'm going to make changes, you could start accepting applications.
That's what I was
now.
just going to say. We could go ahead and put something out. I'm assuming a parks board will be created at this point, but we could still put something out about accepting those applications and vet that process and make sure. And then they could come, they would actually bring the applications to you. I could, if y'all are okay without voting on that, and have them due by the end of August. And I can bring them and put them on the September agenda.
Yeah, because we'd like this group to meet this year,
We want them to meet starting October.
this calendar year, yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'd like to interject a little bit here. One, last month was the first time we've ever heard about this, and I was on a little bit of a different page, not necessarily realizing this was going to be a full-on committee that was part of the Opens Meeting Act. I thought it might be more something seasonally, for example, maybe after every swim season or before every swim season. Let's say after, for example, where we'd have a committee that gets together and thinks through what worked, what didn't, what are some issues, what can we suggest to the council to make, recommendations. I would like to ask that we not vote on this and that we have a little bit more time to think about it, because in my mind, once you make a committee, there is no going back. So I feel like it's not prudent, at least for myself, to vote on this or to say, yes, for sure, I want to do this without working out the kinks. I don't like the idea of saying, hey, let's accept applications when we don't even know exactly how it's working. I would like to ask if we could maybe have another month to maybe engage Ryan and get with Ryan about some of the things that I care about or you care about, and maybe you can bring it all together and bring it back to the board. I did call Ryan for a little bit and ask him a couple of questions about it. And one of the things I thought was interesting is, and I think we kind of probably solved the problem tonight, but with these 5 different places, I would have been disqualified, assuming I'm not on council. I would have been disqualified because I was an HPCA member and a swim team member and a women's club member, and I can't be a part of it all. And so the only way I would have been able to serve according to Ryan would be if I got the at-large position. So I do like the idea of maybe having the control boards. With that, however, the swim team, for example, doesn't have a established leadership on file, which would be something we need to talk to the swim team about. We have leadership, but there's not like a board that I'm aware of. And so that would be something I think I would like to make some phone calls and ask, what's your opinion? How would this work for you? Just call HPCA. For me, I need a little bit more research. One of the things I did want to bring up was section 9-3, page 3 of 4. I was surprised by letter C, conduct fundraising events for the use, enhancement, and improvement of recreational facilities. And I think, Ryan, you touched on it a little bit tonight, as it's not required. It's more of kind of a parameter that they could do it if they wanted. That just seems like a lot of responsibility. Letter E, meet periodically with the mayor and city staff members designated by the mayor to review the condition, use, and future of recreational facilities. My question would be is, how does the council get filled in? Because there are times where the mayor and the public works might have a vision or something that maybe council members aren't necessarily in agreement with. So I would like to see, one of the things I also asked Ryan is, so who puts things on the agenda? And he was very clear that the council doesn't. So my concern would be, let's say I hear a complaint about the pool heat. I can't, as a council member, put anything on the agenda. The residents have to go to the committee first. And then the only people that can put the agenda on the committee is the chair or 2 committee members, similar like to what we have, right? You have the mayor that can put something on the agenda or 2 council members. And so kind of what Ms. Gonzalez said is, it's just one extra step of getting things done. Unless I'm not understanding it, unless we literally can put something on our council agenda without putting it through the committee. Now, all that to say, I think there's a lot of pros and cons. I just need more time to process it and wonder if we could maybe get together with Ryan on our own and discuss things that we feel like is important before you bring it back.
Well, based on what council's talking about, I've got to make changes anyway and bring them back to you the next, at another meeting. But it's up to council what you want to do.
Well, I think I've got some concerns of understanding who's eligible, who's not. Like Ms. Pierce said, she's a member of the swim team, she's HPCA and the women's club, so that bars her from being allowed to serve and represent those. So I'm concerned about that, and I sure don't want to get to where we're accepting applications and we haven't decided how the eligibility works. I'm all in favor of the program that we're putting together. But I think the eligibility, because I want it to be representative. I want to hear from the clubs, the stakeholders.
Yeah.
And plus that gives the citizens another avenue where they can go voice their concerns, and then those are brought to us.
Yeah, so what I plan to bring back will actually require the town to reach out and say, you tell us who you want, and they have that ability.
Yeah, I want to get that. I want to get that clear. We're not. So, in her situation specifically, she would be banned because she's already a council member, so there'd be a conflict of interest. But if somebody's got multiple membership, we've already kind of ironed that out a little bit. We're going. They could still make a move for the at-large opportunity, because we're going to try to designate or encourage the community groups to designate representatives for those positions.
This says she couldn't be at large, because it says if you're a member of any of that, you shall not be.
That's what we addressed, though.
Oh, okay.
That's what we were addressing, so that opportunity can take place.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do kind of like the idea, though, of for the at-large, maybe saying preference will be given to someone who's not a member, or I don't know. If we wanted to do it that way to make sure that people who aren't members of these organizations also have a voice, we could say, you're given preference if you're a community member who's not in these groups. Now, will we have anyone apply? I don't know.
Oh, no. Well, and I think I'm sorry.
But I don't know. I do like the idea of having each group, not appoint, but recommend. Going back to college, that's how our student senate ran. Each group would send someone.
Yeah, and then again, it's not going to be perfect. Right. We're not going to nail this 100%. It's an attempt to get something done that's more participatory and more involving of all the stakeholders when these come up.
No, I like that.
And the council's not surrendering its opportunity. If it wants to unilaterally make a decision, puts it on the agenda, it can. Right. It probably at that point would not be highly recommended, but you could do it. So.
Well, and that's one little bitty concern I have, in the sense that, the council is elected. Boards are very important because they represent, and typically you have people on boards that have a passion for that particular subject matter, which I think is very valuable, and those are the people that want to participate. So it would be wise for the council to take advice from the boards. There is a little bit of pull, for lack of a better word, or pressure that I've experienced or seen with, if you don't take the advice of a board, that is kind of a negative thing, right? And so sometimes, based on residents who get in touch with me, based on convictions, based on the facts that I see or whatever, as council members, we, as the voting leadership of this community, do need to have the ability to be free in our choices based on, what comes our way. And so that's one of my concerns too, is the accountability aspect of, we're voted in, and so we tend to need to listen to our residents because we represent them. They are what make up the people, or make up our city. Not to diminish council, not to diminish boards at all. They are valuable, and I really can see the benefit of they're going to take time and research and bring to us a well-rounded decision. But that is just one of the things I need to process.
Well,
I think this gives us the advantage of having more information. So, when we're discussing something, we might be up here going, well, I wonder what HPCA thinks about that since this vote involves them. We would already know.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, what about swim team? No, it affects them. But we already know.
Right.
Their representative told us how they feel.
Right. And I can tell you from having been in those meetings,
more
that
educated vote.
Yep.
Well,
that,
and
I was just going to say that happens.
Mhm.
So I've been involved in meetings with either the swim team or the HPCA, and because you couldn't get all the stakeholders' engagement, it came back on you later going, well, I had something I wanted to add to that. Well, I had a thought about that. And so that tries to resolve some of that because because look, when it comes to our pools and our parks, there's a lot of participation going on and there's a lot of comment. And so this is a way to try to broaden that perspective out, get the information. And at least as council members, look, our accountability is built in. They don't like us, they vote you out, you're gone. So, but it gives us a chance to at least go, hey, we set this up to get as much information as we could. And you don't like my decision? Okay, I mean, don't vote for me. But we did what we could to get everybody in so that we didn't exclude anybody. And I like I said, you're not going to get perfect out of this, but I think we can do better than what we're doing.
It's valid.
Mayor, may I make a small supplementation on that? The board is advisory only, which means they only advise. You guys have to make the decisions. The fact that you have a very subject matter specific focused board is kind of good, but there's a double-edged sword to it. But that's where the council's discretion comes in because they're focusing on one thing.
Right.
As a council, you got to focus on the whole town, right? So you got to balance all of the things. But to help you properly do that, you got to hear from the subject matter specific boards. So this is a range, and what I'm going to bring back is not going to change. It's all your decision. And as the mayor said, the accountability is built into that part of it. And so I know there can be some thought or pressure about you have to do what a particular board recommends. Those are the things that you guys have to kind of decide if you're going to, bow to or pressure to. But you should listen to them, but factor it in with all of the things that you have to balance.
Sure.
But the decision is ultimately yours.
Yep.
Well, saying with all of those details, I do think that, the control boards, there's something to the idea of having nominations from those individual organizations because they're going to pick somebody that is heavily involved and can really represent their group well. And then maybe what we do is all of those organizations give us a name or two, and then maybe the at-large position is opened up to the public. Something like that might be an idea.
Sure.
By the way, I'm just speaking from experience. I've been helped with creation of a lot of boards and dissolution of boards and things like that. It's great if we keep it really tight, I guess, in terms of, if we'll pick a group, the HBCA says, well, we want, pick these two people, or pick one of these three people, or here's our one person or something, that's great. But if they say, pick this person, but if that person can't attend, then this person is attending, and then if not, no, we just need to keep it who the specific person is that's going to be named to the board. That keeps it a lot tighter, especially in terms of Open Meetings Act.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comment? So you're going to come back to us, Ryan? Yes. Okay.
And then, would you mind when it comes back to us, maybe even giving us some details, or maybe this is more of a word processing document that kind of lets us know from whoever, Patrick, whoever, a little bit of the details on how it flows, kind of the process, Debbie Truman, that we can kind of read through. For example,
I can give you some Cliff Notes that'll.
Cliff Notes, great.
Okay, thank you all. Moving on, discussion regarding possible prohibition of short-term rentals within Hollywood Park. This is my agenda item that I put on here for consideration. The point of it is to get, in part, I have a position I'm leaning toward on it, but in part it's to get the discussion started. So I'm in the real estate business. I'm specifically within the development business. And so I'm very familiar, particularly in the city of San Antonio, of how this has worked and what's been going on. These conversations have touched on in the past have touched on private property, and we don't want to be told what to do with our private property, and we want freedom to do what we want. And I'm generally of that persuasion, quite frankly. But that was all before Airbnb became an organization and a corporation. That was all before VRBO got bought by Expedia in 2015. And that landscape has dramatically changed in the past 10 to 12 years. It is not the same world anymore. And just to give you an example, in the city of San Antonio, I'll give you 3 neighborhoods. So you've got Denver Heights, you've got Dignity Hill, and you've got Government Hill. And all of those organizations in those areas have gotten so overwhelmed by investors buying up properties and setting them up as revenue-producing assets that they're no longer the communities they once were. They are largely, varyingly corporate-owned, corporate-driven, whether it's Terramark or individual entities or groups. They're often stacking neighborhood associations. There's often, I'm not saying this would go on here, but there's often payments that are taking place to represent them. They're coming into a situation where they will go and buy up 7 or 8 properties within a square mile radius, get a loan from them, a favorable loan, because it's a revenue producing property, so they don't have to go through some of the normal steps that a resident would have to do, and they go to town. And they go to work, and the very character of those communities have changed as a result of it. You're starting to see Dallas, of all places, shocking to me, is put forth a ban with a permitting process tied to it. Westlake, up toward Austin, has put forth a ban because they're all reacting to what's taken place. You have these enormous corporations with all this market capitalization who are looking for market share and can drive these opportunities. I don't know that Airbnb does now, but I imagine they will at some point have their own mortgage lending arm. I'm sure they have preferred lenders to try to facilitate those opportunities. They're going to be driving opportunities to I don't think, when you look at corporations like BlackRock and Innovation Housing, they're not scared by $500,000 homes. They're not even scared by $1 million homes. Maybe individuals are, but those corporations aren't. That doesn't bug them one bit. And that's what these towns are finding out. And so there's a whole process to this. The council needs to be aware of it. There has to be a meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission of the town. Letters have to go out to all the residents that the town is considering it. So it's not something that can be done under a bushel somewhere. Everybody's going to know about it, and the council is going to need to develop a position on it. And so this is to start that. I talked to Bonnie Browning, and I think we need to read her comment at some point on this really enjoyable conversation. I enjoyed hearing from you today on it. And I think she had some fair ideas. And look, for me, I'm a homeowner tier 2, and I'm limiting my opportunities by doing this. But I think there's enough at stake with the very culture of Hollywood Park, simply based on what's going on in other Texas communities, that they're having to go back and go, whoa, this is a lot different from what we thought. We're now pushing forth bans, or we're putting forth density limitations, because this is a different world than what we thought it was going to be. And I think right now, Hollywood Park is naked on that regard. We have a nuisance ordinance that, as I've had conversations with Ryan and with code enforcement, is difficult to execute anyway. And so we need to, I'm more of a position of banning them. I am open to maybe some density limitation personally on it. Like I said, I'm my own homeowner. It's affecting me. It's going to limit my abilities in the future, but I think it's worth it. I think it's worth it based upon what the experience these other communities are having, other neighborhoods just within the city of San Antonio are having. They're all dealing with it now because we didn't realize the volume at which this could take place and occur, and we're all starting to see that. So anyway, having said that, and I'm going to read something to you guys because I think it's the best way to do it, to speak to some of those opportunities. But also I'm going to have Shad speak a little bit to it as well. And I'm going to have Ryan speak to it as regards to kind of the process this would go forward with the planning and zoning group as soon as I find my paper on this. I will do that. Okay, so here's an example, and the reason I'm going to read this is because it highlights all the different motivations of this particular town as to why they did it. So bear with me on some of this. So it's an ordinance, it's the front part of it, whereas, it's the whereas part of an ordinance they drafted. And it says, this is the city of Woodway, by the way, Texas, which has a few more people than us, but they're roughly the same size. There's about suburb of Waco. And it says, whereas the city manager reported that city staff receive approximately 24 complaints per year of problems and disruptions stemming from short-term rentals, including parked cars, congesting roadways, and concerns regarding proper permitting. And whereas the city manager reported that larger cities suffer from large gatherings, parking in yards, excessive garbage, and excessive noise due to short-term rentals. And whereas the city does not receive hotel occupancy tax from short-term rentals operating in an unregulated, unregistered environment. And whereas the chief of police reported that an incident of public indecency occurred when a tenant of short-term rental behaved lewdly or obscenely in exposing himself to a resident neighbor of the short-term rental. And I'm going to come back to that opportunity in a minute. Whereas the city manager informed the council of difficulties, and I've talked to our code enforcement, I've talked to law enforcement, this is part of the issue that goes on, difficulties of enforcing city ordinances against transient persons, or people who are just here for a week or here for a few days. They don't care as much is the best way to put that. Violating noise, trash, and other ordinances designed to maintain the health, safety, and welfare of the city of Woodway, Texas, because violators do not return to address their citations, which makes sense. They're in, they're out, they're gone, they're done. Whereas one member of the public, a resident of the city of Woodway, expressed her concern that persons who reside in or own single-family residential properties abutting a short-term rental effectively abut a business to the resident's detriment. And I put in here on my notes, because we do this in leasing apartments, to their impediment to enjoy the peace, safety, and enjoyment of their property. So those short-term rentals are affecting other people's ability to enjoy their property, their own property. Whereas another member of the public expressed concerns about public safety, and whereas the city council deliberated on the effects short-term rentals have on the quality of life of families and long-term residents who predominantly occupy residentially zoned areas of the city of Woodway. And the council, and this is my favorite part that's hard sometimes to put in words, and whereas the council discussed and considered the disruption and danger of short-term rentals posed to residents and long-term tenants when good social order cannot be maintained through the familiarity and accountability endemic to established neighborhoods. And to me, that's the biggest issue. And it goes back and it ties to the guy acting lewdly. I may think I look good naked, and my wife may appease me in that regard, but I'm not going to go in my backyard and make an exhibition of it, because I got to go see Joe the next day. I got to go see Barbara. I know these people, and I got to live next to them.
Is that the only reason?
Well, it probably depends on what I've imbibed of, but yeah, so it's a deterrent even for me. But that's what that comment is. If I'm living here and I've got skin in the game, and I know Joe, and I know Barbara, and I know Helen, I'm surrounded by them, I behave in a way that's courteous to them. That a short-term renter, hopefully they're good, and hopefully they do it, but a lot of times they don't. They go, I'm gone. I'm out of here. I came in here to have a good time. I came in here to enjoy Fiesta. Or now that Wembanyama has showed up, and hopefully he's good, I came in here to enjoy, the championship series or the playoff series. And oh, by the way, after that I'm gone. And oh, by the way, I may make some friends. And hey, you know what? I'm renting a place over here. Oh, y'all come up back to my place. I got a pool. It's good. I know that the Airbnb says I can only have 10 people, but you guys aren't going to stay the night. You can just be 15 or 20 people pile in the house, and we're going to party. Because that's the reality. That's what goes on. And the council can come to its decision, the Planning and Zoning Commission can come to a decision that doesn't have to be a ban. It could, and Dale and I talked about this briefly, it could be a density limitation. We only want so many of these maybe. I've talked to Ryan about this for his perspective, and I get it. From a legal perspective, if it's just a flat out ban, it's a lot easier to enforce than something with accommodation going back and forth. So those are all considerations that have to go on. So that's where I'm coming from. I wanted to read from that because I thought that said well all the different considerations of why you might have a short-term rental ban. We need to read from Ms. Bonnie's comments because she makes some good comments. So let's do that now.
I have a question for the council. Normally, we keep citizen comments to 3 minutes. This is a long.
It's a long one.
I can abbreviate some portions where she's making a lot of points and citing other things and sections of code, if you'd allow, because it's 3 small font pages of information.
And we've all read it in its entirety.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I do want to read one more thing because this goes to code, and this is my fault. Sorry, apologize. So in terms, and I didn't print out the whole thing from Woodway because it's too long. But one of the considerations, so those were all the whereas. Here's our motivations for why we're doing what we're doing. And in terms of the nuisance factor of it, this is, and maybe just simply because I work in this world, it was relevant to me. The traffic, parking, difficulty, noise, trash, and other aspects of hotel, motel, bed and breakfast, and related business activities are not the norm in a residential neighborhood of the city of Woodway. Although, as you've said, a number of towns are discovering it's becoming their norm. Those aspects of commercial use are the very basis for the separation through zoning of commercial and residential uses. Therefore, the city declares short-term rentals a nuisance in the residential districts and prohibit it in the residential districts of the city. And I just read that because, again, it goes to the motivation. We're residences. This is who we are. We're not set up to, we're not downtown zoning where I'm going to put a house next to a business that's next to a pawn shop that's next to a construction yard. That happens in downtown. We're not zoned that way. And we're set up to have this residential family experience. And if we don't protect that, and if we don't safeguard it, you're likely to end up in the situation a lot of these towns are, and you lose that culture and you lose that opportunity. So anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
All right. If you're all okay, I'll try to abbreviate what I can. This is an email from Bonnie Browning. Dear members of the Hollywood Park City Council and fellow residents, I appreciate the opportunity to have my input read at today's meeting and the conversations I've had in recent days with the mayor, council members, and our neighbors regarding this month's agenda item. I'm writing to reiterate my support publicly for allowing STRs and to provide further insight into the positive aspects these flexible accommodations bring to our community. I am a short-term rental owner and host. I am a San Antonio native. My home in Hollywood Park serves as my primary residence and homestead. Due to work obligations and visiting my fiance in the Virginia area, I spend approximately half of the year away from my property. The other half of my time is dedicated to being at home, especially during the holidays. To spend quality time with my adult children who reside in Austin, my family, in Hollywood Park in San Antonio. The decision to purchase my home in Hollywood Park in 2021 was driven by the fact that my cousins and my aunt reside in 2 separate residences within the neighborhood, and that Hollywood Park allows STRs. I currently list my property on Airbnb, which can be viewed at a link, VRBO, and other direct bookings. It is important to note that I am registered with the San Antonio Hotel Occupancy Tax, with San Antonio Hot Tax, and diligently pay my Bexar County taxes each month, ensuring that I fulfill my necessary obligations. Earlier this year, I've already reached out to Fred Timmons via phone and email to seek guidance and ensure any compliance with the Hollywood Park process is met. As the mayor mentioned, this all needs to be addressed and a structure put in place. I am all for that. I am enthusiastic about the prospect of working together to address any concerns and continue to ensure STRs are a positive addition to our neighborhood. To date, all of my guests have been either visiting family in San Antonio or are Hollywood Park residents themselves. Many of them are former or current HP residents who have been temporarily displaced due to renovations or are visiting family for special occasions. Additionally, some guests are former military personnel, teachers, nurses, and other professionals who are simply seeking a comfortable and affordable place to stay while enjoying quality time with their loved ones. Hotels often prove to be out of their budget range and lack the personalized experience that my home provides. A few considerations that should be understood. One, STRs provide a true community service to our neighbors, friends, and family. STRs increase the value of all of our homes in Hollywood Park. STRs protect the community from crime and squatters. STRs have fewer risks than the 30-plus day long-term rentals. STR regulation is already addressed under Article 5 of the Code of Ordinance regarding nuisance-generating properties. So to the council, I would suggest and ask, is this a current issue? And then a lot of questions. How many specific complaints have we received? How many STRs are operating here? Given the primary price point entry to obtain real estate in Hollywood Park and maintain those taxes is a very low probability that they will saturate the neighborhood. If you have ever booked a short-term rental, I expect you are five-star guests, star guests. This is the expectation I have for guests at my home, and they consistently meet it and support formalizing a policy and procedure. My concern is the jumping off point of the prohibition regarding prohibition of short-term rentals, jumping from we have no knowledge of our situation to let's discuss a potential prohibition. Seems anecdotal and lacks evidence. For now, I suggest the council appoint or assign responsibility to monitor STR activity, create a compliance system, and strengthen the current nuisance-generating property ordinance. In conclusion, I kindly request the City Council consider the numerous benefits that they can bring to the community while remaining the welcoming neighborhood that we are. Thank you for your attention to this matter. I hope that's enough.
Okay. I asked Shad to hang around because Shad is from law enforcement's perspective on it, and he's got some reflection on it too. So, Shad, if you would speak to it.
Sure. Yeah. I don't have the data or the numbers in front of me of how many times we responded to an address that is an Airbnb or short-term rental, because it's hard for us to track that because we go to an address and it doesn't have a way to classify it otherwise. So it's hard for me to kind of track that. But I do know there's been some occasions where we responded to a home that was being used for a party, and they had rented the home for the weekend, and I couldn't tell you the address, but we had 3 or 4 calls to parking issues. Most of it's noise related. They're just being really loud, and they're in the backyards of these homes being really loud, and then the others, the parking issues. We don't have a lot of those, but we do get them. I've gotten them. The other perspective I thought and I brought this to the mayor earlier today, my family and I, we bought a home 10 years ago, and we had a great neighbor, and he sold his home to Airbnb because he got transferred with his job. So I lived next door to an Airbnb and have for about 7 years. Had I known it was going to turn out to be that way, I would not have bought it, honestly. My neighbors change about every 2 to 3 days. I have no idea who's going to be there from one day to the next. Sometimes we have great people next door, and sometimes we don't. I have 2 teenage daughters, and listen, I have cameras on my home. There's a reason for that because it's not always a great experience. So when I heard that, I thought, well, these short-term rentals to 30 days or more are one thing, but when you're renting out a home for 2 or 3 days at a time in this area in northern San Antonio, it's mostly young people, and there's a hot tub on the back porch of this property, so you could imagine, some of the things we have to hear next door, and there's no recourse. I have no recourse. And then there's the trash and the parking. There's enough parking for 1 car in the driveway and 1 car on the street. Well, there's always 5 people or 5 cars, right? So they're always all over the place. So it didn't add value to my experience in my home. even as an officer. Now, listen, I get enough officer time during the day. I don't want to go home and play neighborhood officer, right? So I just play a cop on TV. I don't really do it, right? But so when I go home, I don't want to be the neighborhood policeman, right? So we kind of stick to ourselves. But I do have the property manager's phone number. She lives up north somewhere in Chicago or somewhere. She's very responsive if we do have a problem. She's very responsive about it. But I don't care to have different neighbors every 3 weeks or every 3 weekends in a row. So I don't like that part of it. And I think that's about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Ryan, would you explain, because it's detailed, will you explain the process for which the city would go through considering?
Yeah, so
this?
In order to either ban or place a use restriction of some sort, a density restriction or anything like that, onto your residential neighborhoods, you have to change your zoning code. And your zoning code, the state law is very specific about the process you have to follow. So you have a planning and zoning commission, and what happens is you first have to issue have a public hearing, but you have to send notices to everyone who'd be affected by the zone change within 200 feet of anyone affected by the zone change. Well, if you're changing all of your residential area, you're sending it to everybody. And so, but you have the public hearings, and the Planning and Zoning Commission then has to meet and have discussion. Then they have to make a recommendation to you. Now, the state law does not allow you to consider a change until your Planning and Zoning Commission makes a recommendation report to you. You then have to have another public hearing, and then the council can meet. But there's I often say a boatload of notice and hearings and things that you've got to go through until the council finally decides what it wants to do. Now, it doesn't have to, that's like the short version.
Sure.
I've seen them actually take longer because you may give a direction to the P&Z, look at multiple options, and so they bounce around the options for more than one meeting. They don't have to have one public hearing, but they have to, they meet until they're ready to make a recommendation to the council. And so it isn't a overnight action. It isn't an overnight solution. It's something that if you're going to commit to doing that, one, there's going to be some cost involved because you are going to have to do the public hearings, and you're going to have to do the mailings, and you're going to have to do newspaper postings so many days out from each public hearing. And there's kind of a checklist chart that Patrick and I would go over, but I'm sure he's seen it before, and he knows exactly which ones they are. But you have to make sure that you're sending out the notices and you're having the public hearings, and there are actually windows that from once you set the public hearing, you have to have a window of when the board and things has to meet. And your current P&Z, I don't think the current one has met yet.
They have not met.
Yeah.
That's another little challenge to that, because they don't, there's the nature of this town, they don't have to meet very often.
Yeah.
So they are named, and we have a board, but I'd like to meet some of them.
Yeah, so understand it's a long process.
Right. And again, from my concern was that too many of these towns got caught naked on it. They had nothing on the books addressing it other than a simple nuisance ordinance. And it's a long haul, it's a long process, but I think it's terribly worthwhile for the city to engage that process rather than reacting after the fact, after we've gotten loaded up with them and we're trying to react to them already here. So, anyway.
Ryan, I've got a question, if I may. Because I'm concerned about this issue, not from an individual that sent the email. I mean, she lives in her house most of the year or half of the year, and she rents it out the other half. She still has skin in the game with her neighbors. I'm not worried about that. I have a serious concern about corporations buying houses. I don't think Hollywood Park's out of the price point for that. They've got huge amounts of capital, and they want to dump it in dirt. And that's a way for them to generate income while the property is appraising, and I don't think that's good for our neighborhood. So we have to change our zoning, and we have to go through our zoning board. So where do those recommended changes originate from? Do they make the recommended changes and have hearings and present that to us and we vote yay or nay? Or do we go to them and say, this is what we want?
You can technically do it either way, but
Okay.
if you're unsure because they need to kind of analyze what would be the best fit for Hollywood Park,
right?
Then you just task them with examining it and making a recommendation to you, and then you can. The council will be, you're going to be able to watch the hearings and get the reports as they're going. So once you receive the report, there are certain restrictions that can apply. Neighbors can actually, there's a process where they can send in a protest.
Yeah, we do the same thing with the Board of Adjustment and the Board of Appeals, anybody with, within the 200 feet. Normally, of a residence, we had within all of those homes within that 200-foot radius, if whether or not their property is encapsulated or not, it just touches that radius. They all get a notice, and they can check essentially yes or no, and they can send it in, or they don't have to respond either. But that's how we gathered that input, and that allows for the board to have a little bit better understanding of what the neighbors want. So.
And then normally I recommend that one of my attorneys be present at the board meetings, because what happens is they say, okay, we think we want it to be this, we want it to be this, and then we actually draft the language change depending on exactly how complex they want it. But that's, I mean, they happen both ways, but honestly, when you're talking about having them examine this and come back to you, then basically they would make the recommendation of what it should be. And that would be the report, and then you vote it up or down, or you make changes at that point.
Okay. Well, I think I will explain what my concern is, and I appreciate you putting this on the agenda, and I think it is a long process, as I understand it, when you get into the zoning and what's going to work, what's enforceable, and I think is definitely a road that we need to start going down before it's too late.
Yeah.
So that's my opinion.
And speaking to that opportunity, we have tentatively, and correct me where I'm wrong, Patrick, but we've tentatively scheduled an initial meeting of the Planning and Zoning Board in August. Am I correct?
That's correct. Because of this time frame, if council is to move forward with some version of this,
right.
We have to plan ahead.
Yeah.
So.
And like I said, they'll end up meeting multiple times. There'll be multiple engagement, and this is just to get the ball started. But the council needs to be aware of it, because you will be getting feedback from everybody, because they will eventually get a notice in the mail that this is being considered, and you need to formulate an idea of what you want and how do you want to respond to that opportunity. So.
I mean, I appreciate looking forward so that we don't get caught naked, as you're saying, as that one gentleman did in
correct.
In Woodway. I will say I appreciate the concerns, and I understand both sides of this. I mean, I understand no one wants to live next door to the Airbnb. I get that. I also think we're very different from Woodway. Woodway borders Lake Waco. It's less than 15 minutes from Baylor University. A quick Zillow search right now shows you can get a house, not every house, not the nicest mansion in town, but you can buy in Woodway for about $250,000. I think that we are not going to be subject to the same sorts of things that Woodway is. I mean, and I'm not, maybe I'm being Pollyanna, but I think if people are looking, or corporations are looking for short-term rental investments, they can get a 3 or 4 bedroom house across 281 for about half the price. And so an investor is going to think that way. and I don't see why they would spend twice as much and have twice as much maintenance, twice as much yard to mow, et cetera, here in Hollywood Park. We're also not, some of the other communities in San Antonio, you mentioned smaller yards, smaller lots, smaller maintenance, also happen to be a lot closer to downtown and the things that party going people are looking to do. They go on the Riverwalk, they go to the Pearl, they want an Airbnb right next to that. As wonderful as our location is, we're not right next door to any of the major hotspot tourist attractions like all those other neighborhoods that you mentioned are, or like Woodway is. So I'm kind of looking at it as if it ain't broke, don't fix it, because I am concerned about infringing on people's ability to do what they want with their property within reason. And I think that with the possible exception of the one garden home, we haven't had an issue with this. It's not a problem. And I think some of the people who've spoken on this make a really good point. A lot of times it's families coming to visit over the holidays, or it's people renovating their homes, which happens all the time here in Hollywood Park. People buy older homes, fix them up. Maybe they need somewhere to stay for 2-3 months. And so if they can find a short-term rental in the area, we can keep people here. I just am wondering if this is going to be a very time-intensive process and, and cost us some money. Is it something that we really need to be doing? That's my thought.
Yeah, I would say in response to that, I don't disagree with that. I think obviously you've got tourist towns that are going to be more susceptible to the opportunity, but I think it's telling that a city like Dallas has decided it's intense enough there that they're going to ban it and attach a permitting process to it. It's interesting that Westlake, not just Woodway, but Westlake has now banned them. There's another suburbs up in Austin, which are very similar to ours in the sense of how they're situated, that are in the process of considering those same bans and or density limitations. Even Bonnie's, it's interesting how she advertises on Airbnb. She doesn't call it it's a ranch cottage. Is how she advertises it, and I don't think, although it's certainly not on a lake and it's certainly not going to be like Port Aransas, I do think that opportunity exists, and I think even if we end up something on a density limitation opportunity, to where and going, well, we're going to allow it, but we want only 4 within 3 square miles, and those kind of opportunities, I think it's worth doing.